Hey, if you're new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It would really mean a lot to me, and honestly, it'd make my day. If you already did, thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, if you like listening to fan fiction, check out my other channel. The link's in the description.
The New Dawn of Monkey D. Luffy by Zero King Ages. Just 2 days before the start of his epic adventure, Monkey D. Luffy finds himself in an unexpected battle against a foreign soul trying to take over his body. With his unwavering spirit, Luffy fights back and manages to repel the entity, but not without consequence. In the process, he gains fragmented memories of a potential future.
The sun was just beginning to rise over Fuchsia village, casting a warm, golden light across the rooftops and cobblestone streets. Monkey D. Luffy wandered through the vibrant village, a place that felt both familiar and filled with the weight of his dreams. The salty sea breeze carried the sounds of laughter and lively chatter, a reminder of the life he was leaving behind. Fuchsia village was a small, close-knit community where everyone knew each other. Fishermen gathered at the docks, their hands calloused from years of labor, mending nets and sharing stories of the ocean's bounty. Children played by the water's edge, their carefree laughter echoing through the air, while local vendors shouted cheerfully, hawking fresh catches of the day and handmade goods. Luffy took a deep breath, inhaling the rich scent of the sea mixed with the aroma of grilled fish wafting from a nearby stall. His heart raced with excitement as he thought of the grand adventure that lay ahead. In just 2 days, he would set sail, leaving the comforts of home for the unknown expanses of the Grand Line. He could almost feel the salty spray of the ocean on his face and hear the call of the horizon beckoning him. As Luffy strolled through the village, he was greeted by familiar faces. Makino, the kind-hearted bartender who had always looked out for him, waved from the doorway of her tavern. "Luffy, are you ready for your big adventure?" she called, her voice filled with warmth and encouragement. Luffy grinned, his trademark smile lighting up his face. "You bet, Makino, I'm going to become the Pirate King." Makino chuckled, shaking her head in amusement. "Just make sure you come back and visit us, okay? We'll miss you around here." "I promise," Luffy replied, his voice brimming with confidence. As he continued his walk, Luffy encountered Mayor Whoop Slap, who was less enthusiastic about his plans. "Luffy, you reckless boy," the mayor grumbled, adjusting his glasses. "The sea is dangerous. You should think twice before setting off on such a foolhardy journey." Luffy's expression turned serious, his eyes reflecting his determination. "I know it's dangerous, but I have to do this, it's my dream." The mayor sighed, recognizing the resolve in Luffy's gaze. "Just be careful out there, Luffy. The world is vast and full of challenges." With the village's well wishes and concerns echoing in his mind, Luffy made his way to his favorite training spot, a secluded cliffside overlooking the ocean. Here, he could focus on honing his skills, preparing himself for the trials that awaited him. Luffy began his training with a series of punches and kicks, each movement precise and powerful. He remembered the first time he had met Shanks, the red-haired pirate who had inspired him to dream big. Shanks had shown him what it meant to be free, to live life on his own terms. "I won't let you down, Shanks," Luffy muttered, his determination fueling each strike. As he trained, memories of Ace and Sabo flooded his mind. He recalled their laughter, their shared dreams of adventure, and the promise they had made to each other. "We'll meet again on the high seas," Ace had said, his eyes full of hope. Luffy clung to those memories, using them to fortify his spirit against the dark whispers that sought to undermine his resolve. The foreign soul's presence was subtle at first, a whisper at the edge of his consciousness. But as the day wore on, it grew more insistent, weaving visions of power and conquest into his thoughts. "Join me, Luffy," it urged, its voice smooth and seductive. "Together, we can reshape the world." Luffy shook his head, trying to dispel the intrusive thoughts. "I don't want that kind of power," he shouted, his voice echoing against the cliffs. "I want to be free." The battle within him intensified, a clash of wills that left him breathless and exhausted. But Luffy refused to give in. He drew strength from the memories of his brothers, the warmth of their bond a shield against the darkness. During the chaos, Luffy recalled his dreams of adventure. He thought of Shanks, the red-haired pirate who had inspired him to seek the sea. He remembered the thrill of his first taste of adventure, the way his heart had raced when he had met the pirate and promised to become stronger. The thought of disappointing Shanks fueled his fight against the entity's influence. But before he fought back, he saw the day he lost Ace. It had been a nightmare, a moment that shattered his world. The memory of Ace's final words echoed in his mind, just like we promised on that day. The way I lived my life. I have no regrets about it. I'm not lying, what I truly wanted wasn't fame or anything like that after all, was it good? That I was born, what I wanted, was the answer to that question? I can't speak loud enough for the others to hear it. Please, pass on what I'm about to say. Old man. Everyone, and you, Luffy. Even though I'm so worthless. Even though I carry the blood of a demon. Thank you for loving me. Those words were a fire in his heart, urging him to fight back. He had to honor Ace's sacrifice by living fully, by pursuing the dream they had shared. As the internal struggle raged on, Luffy began to notice something strange. A tingling sensation spread through his body, a warmth that seemed to emanate from deep within. It was as if a dormant power was stirring, responding to his determination and willpower. Unbeknownst to Luffy, his Haki was beginning to awaken. The clash with the foreign soul had triggered something within him, unlocking a latent potential that had been lying dormant. Though he didn't fully understand what was happening, Luffy could feel a newfound strength coursing through his veins. With each punch and kick, his movements became more fluid and more precise. He could sense the presence of the foreign soul more clearly, its intentions laid bare before him. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing him to perceive the world in a new light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, Luffy felt the foreign soul's grip begin to weaken. With a final surge of determination, he expelled it from his mind, collapsing to the ground, gasping but victorious. Lying there, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of Fuchsia Village, Luffy felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would not allow any shadow to dim his dreams. In just 2 days, he would set sail into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Rising to his feet, Luffy turned to face the horizon, his heart filled with resolve. I'll find my crew, he whispered to himself. We'll sail together and face whatever challenges come our way. Nothing will hold me back. With that promise echoing in his mind, Luffy set his sights on the future, ready to embrace the adventure that awaited him. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Luffy returned to the village, his mind still buzzing with the events of the day. He found himself drawn to the tavern, where Makino was closing up for the night. Hey, Luffy, she greeted him with a warm smile. How was your training? Luffy hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain what had happened. It was different, he finally said, a thoughtful expression on his face. Makino raised an eyebrow, sensing that there was more to the story. Different how? Luffy shrugged, trying to find the right words. I felt something inside me, like a power waking up. Makino studied him for a moment, her eyes filled with understanding. Sounds like you're growing, Luffy. You're on the brink of something big. Luffy nodded, feeling a sense of excitement and anticipation. Yeah, I think so too. As Luffy left the tavern and made his way back to his home, he couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at the journey that lay ahead. The world was vast, filled with opportunities and dangers alike, and he was ready to embrace it all. Here I come, world, he shouted into the night, his voice carrying the promise of adventure, dreams, and the unyielding spirit of his mark. With his Haki beginning to awaken and his resolve stronger than ever, Luffy knew that he was ready to face whatever challenges awaited him on the Grand Line. The dawn of his adventure was just beginning, and he was determined to seize it with both hands. As dawn broke over Fuchsia Village, the first light of day spilled across the rooftops, casting a golden hue over the familiar streets where Luffy had grown up. The village, nestled between lush green hills and the vast expanse of the ocean, was slowly waking up to the sounds of chirping birds and the distant crash of waves. The air was thick with anticipation, and the salty tang of the sea invigorated Luffy as he prepared for the moment he had dreamed of since childhood. Today was the last day he would walk these streets as a village boy. Tomorrow, he would become a pirate. Luffy's heart raced with excitement as he sprinted through the village, his sandals slapping against the cobblestone paths. The morning sun warmed his skin, and he felt a sense of freedom that he had never experienced before. He paused at the docks, where fishermen were already busy hauling in their nets, their voices mingling with the gentle lapping of waves. The sight of the small boats bobbing in the water reminded him of the adventures he longed to embark on. He watched as the fishermen worked, their hands deftly entangling the nets filled with glistening fish. The smell of the sea was strong here, mixed with the earthy scent of the wooden docks. Luffy took a deep breath, savoring the moment. He knew he would miss this, the simple, everyday life of the village. But the call of the sea was too strong to resist. His next stop was the tavern, a cozy establishment with wooden beams and a thatched roof, where the villagers were already gathering for their morning routines. As he entered, the chatter died down, and a warm wave of nostalgia washed over him. The tavern was filled with familiar faces, people who had watched him grow from a mischievous child into the determined young man he was today. "Luffy, so, it's true? You're leaving?" a villager asked, surprise and pride evident in their voice. The speaker was an elderly man with a weathered face and kind eyes, someone who had always treated Luffy like a grandson. "Yep, I'm going to make you all proud," Luffy declared, his determination clear. His voice was filled with the confidence of youth, and his eyes sparkled with dreams of adventure. The villagers raised their mugs in cheer, their voices rising in encouragement. Luffy felt a deep connection to them, the bonds of friendship woven tightly around his heart. He promised himself that he would return with tales of glory and adventure. The tavern was filled with laughter and the clinking of mugs, and for a moment, Luffy allowed himself to bask in the warmth of their support. As the day progressed, Luffy found himself at the edge of the village, gazing out at the sea. The waves danced under the sunlight, calling to him like a siren's song. The ocean stretched out endlessly before him, a vast, uncharted world waiting to be explored. He could almost hear the whispers of the sea, promising adventure and freedom. Suddenly, a flash of memory struck him, Ace's laughter, Sabo's mischievous grin, and the weight of the promises he had made to them. The thrill of adventure was intertwined with the pain of loss, and he felt a resolve settle deep within him. He remembered the times they had spent together, dreaming of the day they would set sail and conquer the Grand Line. Those memories were bittersweet, filled with both joy and sorrow. With just one day remaining before his departure, Luffy contemplated the journey ahead. He wanted to forge a new path, different from the memories that haunted him, yet he knew he had to take the same route in the Grand Line to save his friends. "I'll make this adventure mine," he decided, a newfound determination igniting within him. He clenched his fists, feeling the strength of his resolve coursing through him. As twilight descended, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Luffy gathered the villagers at the docks for his farewell. The atmosphere was thick with emotion. Laughter mingled with the bittersweet taste of goodbye. The villagers had brought lanterns, their soft glow casting a warm light over the gathering. "Thank you for everything," Luffy shouted, his voice rising above the crowd. "I'll come back with treasures and stories." His words were met with cheers and applause, the villagers' faces filled with pride and hope. Makino, the tavern owner who had been like a mother to Luffy, stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "You've grown so much, Luffy. Be safe out there. We'll be waiting for your return," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. She reached out and pulled him into a tight embrace, her warmth and love enveloping him. "Don't worry, Makino, I'll be strong," he replied, his confidence shining through. He hugged her back, feeling the weight of her concern and the depth of her affection. Curly Dayton and the mountain bandits stood nearby, their expressions a mix of pride and concern. Dayton crossed her arms, feigning toughness. "You better not go dying out there, we'll be expecting a big comeback," she barked, her voice gruff but her eyes soft with worry. "Yeah, Luffy. You can't let us down," a bandit chimed in, his voice booming with camaraderie. "I won't, I promise," Luffy laughed, his heart swelling with gratitude for their support. He knew that despite their rough exterior, they cared deeply for him. As the villagers held back tears, Luffy took a deep breath, feeling the salty breeze on his face. "I'll never forget you all. You're my family," he declared, his voice filled with sincerity and love. Suddenly, a massive sea beast emerged from the depths, causing a stir among the villagers. Its scales glistened in the fading light, and its eyes were like pools of deep ocean blue. Luffy felt a rush of excitement. This is it, he thought, adrenaline surging as he prepared to tame the creature. "Luffy, be careful," Makino shouted, worry etched on her face. "I got this," he called back, a confident grin plastered on his face. He felt the thrill of the challenge, the exhilaration of facing the unknown. With a leap, Luffy bounded toward the sea beast, his resolve unwavering. He danced around it, using his gum-gum techniques to show he meant no harm. The creature, intrigued by his bravery, soon calmed and swam closer. Its massive form moved gracefully through the water, and Luffy could feel the power and majesty of the beast. "Let's go," Luffy exclaimed, climbing onto the beast's back. He secured his small boat to it, ready for his first adventure. The sea beast let out a low, rumbling sound as if acknowledging Luffy's courage and determination. "Goodbye, everyone, I'll be back with treasures and tales," he shouted as the beast surged into the waves, pulling him away from the shore. The villagers' cheers echoed across the water, their voices carrying into the night. As Luffy looked back one last time, he saw the faces that had shaped him, the people who had believed in him and supported him. He waved, feeling a mix of excitement and nostalgia. The thrill of the ocean welcomed him, and he felt a surge of excitement for the adventures that lay ahead. The sea stretched out before him, vast and mysterious, filled with endless possibilities. Luffy's heart soared with the promise of new horizons, of challenges to overcome, and dreams to fulfill. He knew that the journey would not be easy, but he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the sea beast carried him further from the shore, Luffy allowed himself to dream of the future. He imagined the friends he would make, the battles he would fight, and the treasures he would find. He thought of Ace and Sabo, of the promises he had made to them, and he vowed to keep those promises, no matter what. The night sky was filled with stars, their light reflecting off the water like 1,000 tiny lanterns. Luffy felt a sense of wonder and awe, a connection to the world around him that was both humbling and exhilarating. He knew that he was just a small part of something much larger, a vast and beautiful world waiting to be explored. As he sailed into the unknown, Luffy's heart was filled with hope and determination. He was ready to face lay ahead, to forge his own path and create his own destiny. With the wind in his hair and the sea at his back, he felt truly alive, ready to embrace the adventure of a lifetime. It had been a few hours since Luffy had set off on his adventure with his pet sea beast, an eel, and now his first obstacle had appeared. "There's the whirlpool I got sucked into." "Alright then," he said, turning to the eel. "Don't come out until I call you." The eel nodded, understanding its cue. As he devoured all the fruit in the barrel before sealing itself inside, ready for safety. "Time for a ride," Luffy declared, excitement bubbling in his chest. He waited for a moment, feeling the anticipation build, until he sensed it. The boat was slowly being drawn into the whirlpool. As it began to spin, Luffy's eyes widened. "Ah, I'm getting dizzy," he exclaimed, his vision swirling in a chaotic blur. At that moment, with the world spinning around him, he decided to do the only sensible thing. He closed his eyes and let himself drift off to sleep. As Luffy's boat spun wildly in the whirlpool, miles away, the luxurious passenger ship sailed steadily through the serene waters of East Blue, blissfully unaware of the approaching storm in more ways than one. The crew, dressed in crisp uniforms, kept a watchful eye over the wealthy passengers indulging in laughter and dance in the grand ballroom below. The atmosphere was a mixture of sophistication and carefree delight. On the upper deck, elegantly dressed individuals sipped from glasses of fine wine, enjoying the tranquility of the open sea. It was the perfect day for relaxing, with a clear sky holding only a handful of cotton-like clouds and docile waves gently rocking the ship. On the deck, two crew members leaned against the guardrail, their gazes lazily drifting over the horizon as they exchanged idle chatter. One of them, a tall man with a crooked grin and a hint of stubble, squinted at something bobbing in the water. "Oi, check that out," he said, nudging his companion, who was much younger and slightly more enthusiastic. The younger crew member peered over the edge, adjusting his cap. "A barrel?" "Looks like a wine barrel," the older man commented, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Probably wreckage from that whirlpool earlier. Might be our lucky day." "Yeah, let's haul it up." The two scrambled to grab a line, casting it over the edge and latching onto the barrel. With a bit of effort, they dragged the bulky container onto the deck, their grins wide with anticipation. "It's heavy," the younger crew member chuckled as they rolled the barrel across the deck, Must be full. Before they could pop it open, a distant yell from the lookout cut through the comm. Pirates, I see pirates. The lookout's voice trembled with urgency. It's the Alvida pirates. The mood on the ship shifted immediately. Chaos erupted as the crew snapped into action, some rushing to ready the ship's defenses, others shouting orders. The barrel, forgotten in the commotion, rolled toward the lower decks, unnoticed by the panicked crew. The pirate ship closed in fast, its dark sails billowing in the breeze. At the bow stood a figure that made even the hardened crew hesitate. A towering woman, her body grotesquely large, skin freckled with rough patches, and her greasy black hair clinging to her face under a tattered cowboy hat. In her grip was an iron club as thick as a ship's mast, slung casually over her shoulder like a toy. This was Iron Club Alvida, a feared pirate captain with a bounty of 5 million belly. Men, who's the fairest on all the seas? Alvida's voice boomed over the distance. Her crew, pale-faced and trembling, immediately shouted in unison, Alvida-sama. Alvida's yellowed teeth flashed in a grin as she raised her club high. Charge. Her pirates surged forward, swinging across ropes, their weapons gleaming in the sunlight as they boarded the passenger ship. Within moments, the once luxurious vessel transformed into a battlefield, screams of panic from the passengers blending with the clash of swords and the shouts of the crew trying to defend them. Amidst the chaos, a small boy with glasses and pink hair cowered on the pirate ship, his knees shaking uncontrollably. Kobe. He was barely more than a deckhand, a prisoner of Searstons, forced into servitude by Alvida's cruelty. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched the carnage unfold. Kobe. Alvida's bellow sent a chill down his spine. Why yes, Alvida-sama, Kobe stammered, trembling as he dashed across the pirate ship's deck toward the boarded vessel. He barely made it before Alvida swung her massive club, narrowly missing his frail form. Sweat trickled down his brow as he hurried below deck, seeking any way to appease his ruthless captain. Think, Kobe muttered to himself as he ran, finally stumbling into a storage room that smelled faintly of salt and rum. His eyes scanned the dimly lit space until they landed on something large, something familiar. A barrel? Kobe's eyes widened as he approached the heavy object. It was the same one the crew had hauled aboard earlier. Maybe this will do. Alvida-sama loves wine, right? He gave it a tentative push, but the barrel refused to budge. Kobe groaned, his arms already aching from the effort. It's too heavy, maybe I should. His thoughts were interrupted by footsteps. Kobe barely had time to react as 3 of Alvida's grinning lackeys appeared at the door. Oi, Kobe, one of them sneered. What are you doing with that barrel? Trying to hoard it for yourself? Kobe's words tumbled out in a panic. And no, I just thought maybe Alvida-sama would. Yeah, whatever, the second pirate cut him off, greedily eyeing the barrel. Let's crack it open. The third pirate laughed menacingly as they hefted the barrel upright, preparing to pry off the top. Just as they were about to open it, a sudden burst of energy exploded from the barrel, sending the lid flying. Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, a fist shot out, knocking one of the pirates unconscious with a single blow. From the barrel emerged a young man, his black hair wild and windswept, a straw hat perched precariously on his head. His skin was tan, and he wore a red vest and blue shorts, his carefree grin widening as he stretched his arms over his head. What a great nap, the young man declared with enthusiasm, his eyes closed in bliss. He stretched languidly, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him, his foot resting on the unconscious pirate. The remaining 2 pirates stared in dumbfounded shock. Who the hell is this guy? One of them sputtered. Monkey D. Luffy, I'm gonna become king of the pirates, Luffy echoed. Kobe stared at the strange boy who had burst from the barrel like a force of nature. Could this be a pirate? He didn't act like the bloodthirsty criminals he'd seen under Alvida's reign of terror. There was something different about him, something almost reassuring. But that thought only terrified Kobe more. How could he possibly trust someone who claimed to want to become the king of the pirates? Luffy grinned, stretching his arms behind his head as he surveyed the room. Now then, where's Zoro? I need to rescue him and find food on the way. Zoro? Kobe blurted out, eyes wide with disbelief. You mean pirate hunter Zoro? He's locked up at the Marine base, waiting for his execution. Luffy nodded casually. Yosh. We're going there next. But first. His gaze turned locking onto the two remaining pirates, who were still trying to make sense of what just happened, and yelled, Jamma. The two pirates blinked in confusion. What? Luffy laughed, then shot his fist forward, stretching it across the room. It collided with the two pirates, sending them flying into the wall. That's better. As the chaos of battle raged on around them, Kobe's eyes widened, still trying to process the whirlwind that was Luffy. You just took out those pirates like it was nothing. Luffy shrugged, a playful smile on his face. They weren't that tough. But I'm really hungry. Do you have any food on this ship? Kobe hesitated, glancing back at the ongoing fight. I don't know, Alvida-sama will be furious if I. Forget her. Luffy intoned dismissively. We need to get out of here and find something to eat. Luffy ignored Kobe's awestruck expression as he turned toward the ship's main deck. Come on, Kobe. Let's go find some food. And maybe we'll run into someone else along the way. Just as they reached the deck, a loud crash echoed across the ship. Luffy grinned. There she was, darting between crates, her blue pirate outfit and orange hair unmistakable. There she is, Luffy exclaimed, his excitement bubbling over. That's my navigator. What? Kobe stammered, still caught up in Luffy's whirlwind energy. You know her? Not yet, but I will. Luffy shouted, charging toward her without a second thought. Nami's hands worked quickly, stuffing as many jewels as she could into her satchel. She didn't have much time. The Marines would be here soon, and she had no intention of getting caught. She didn't care about the passengers, the pirates, or the chaos swirling around her. All that mattered was the treasure, her ticket to freedom from Arlong's grip. When she heard the commotion behind her, turning around, she saw Luffy barreling toward her, his carefree demeanor completely at odds with the chaos surrounding them. What the heck are you doing, idiot? Just helping out, Luffy shouted back, leaping over a fallen pirate and landing right beside her. You're going to be my navigator. Nami froze, her sharp eyes narrowing at the boy who had just leapt into the fray. Navigator? Are you out of your mind? She didn't have time for this nonsense. But there was something in his grin, something in the way he spoke, that made her hesitate. He didn't seem like the typical pirate. Not that it mattered. She had no intention of joining him. Not now, not ever. She says. Navigator, are you insane? I'm not joining some random pirate. Sure you are, Luffy replied, grinning. Nami blinked, momentarily stunned by his audacity. Then, she smirked. Oh really? You don't even know me, and you think I'll just join you? Luffy shrugged. I don't need to know you. I already know you're amazing. Nami huffed, shaking her head in disbelief. You're really stupid. Luffy beamed. Yes. Before Nami could reply, the cannon fire rang out, signaling the Marines' arrival as they closed in fast. The deck was shaking under the assault, the ship starting to splinter from the force. We don't have time for this, Nami shouted as she spun on her heels, dodging the falling debris from the ship. If we don't get out of here soon, we're all gonna sink with the ship. Luffy, completely unfazed by the explosions, beamed at her, then lead the way, navigator. Nami huffed, eyes narrowing. I'm not your navigator. Luffy just laughed. You will be. Before she could protest, another cannon blast rocked the ship, this time knocking it off balance. Nami's sharp reflexes kicked in, and she grabbed onto a nearby mast to steady herself, her mind already racing through escape plans. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over them, blocking out the sun. Luffy and Nami turned just in time to see Alvida's towering figure cast a long shadow across the deck, her iron club capable of smashing bones with a single swing. Even the bravest among the crew hesitated to face her. But Luffy just grinned, standing there with an easy confidence that made Kobe's stomach twist. Was he going to try and fight her? There you are, you little rats, Alvida bellowed, her voice a mixture of rage and arrogance. I'll crush you where you stand. Nami's heart nearly leapt out of her chest. We need to move, she shouted, but Luffy stood his ground, casually dusting his hands. Who's the fairest on all the seas? Alvida roared, her grotesque grin widening as she swung the club down with terrifying force. Luffy tilted his head slightly to the side, still smiling. You sure talk a lot, gum pistol, he said, his tone light as ever. Then, faster than Nami could blink, Luffy's fist shot forward, stretching like a rubber band, and collided with Alvida's stomach. Boom! The impact was deafening. Alvida's eyes bulged comically wide as her body was launched through the air like a cannonball, crashing through the ship's main mast and disappearing into the horizon. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Nami, Kobe, and even the remaining pirates froze in shock, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Luffy, meanwhile, simply dusted his hands off again and grinned. That was easy. Kobe's jaw dropped, and his eyes filled with awe. Why, you just knocked her out with one punch. Luffy stretched his arms behind his head, completely unfazed. Yeah, she was annoying. Anyway, where's that boat? There's only one boat left, she said quickly, scanning the deck. We need to get there before the Marines board. Leave that to me, Luffy replied, his grin never fading. He grabbed Kobe's arm and stretched out his other hand to latch onto a distant part of the ship. In one swift motion, he launched them toward the lifeboat, landing perfectly next to it. Nami caught up a second later, looking between Luffy and the approaching Marines. Her survival instincts took over. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. I'll get us out of here, but don't think this means I'm joining your crew. Luffy just smiled, hopping into the boat as Nami untied it from the ship. Whatever you say, navigator. The boat hit the water with a splash, and Nami immediately took charge, expertly steering them through the wreckage and debris floating in the sea. Her hands moved fast, guiding the boat past sinking ships and dodging cannon fire. Hold on, Nami shouted as she navigated through the narrow gap between the two ships. Luffy, laughing the entire time, looked back at the Marines who were getting smaller on the horizon. You're amazing, Nami. Nami didn't reply, but a small smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth. Despite herself, she was impressed with how smoothly they'd managed to escape. As they sailed away from the chaos, Kobe was left speechless. That was insane. Luffy stretched out, leaning back as if they'd just had a nice stroll. Told ya, the real adventure starts now. As they sailed into the sunset, Kobe finally gathered his thoughts. But Luffy, how did you know to come here? I mean, it's so dangerous. Luffy shrugged, looking ahead with mischief and laughed as he said, She, I just knew there would be something worth finding. The boat hit the water with a splash, but as Nami expertly navigated them through the ships, they all heard a strange sound, a low rumble from the deep. Kobe's eyes widened in alarm, and Nami's brow furrowed. What the hell is that sound? Nami shouted over the crashing waves and the distant cannon fire. Just then, a massive shape rose from the water next to the boat. The sea beast, the giant eel that Luffy had tamed, surfaced with a loud splash, towering over the small craft. Its slick, serpent-like body shimmered under the sunlight, its eyes glowing with loyalty as it looked toward Luffy. Kobe's jaw dropped, his hands shaking as he pointed at the massive creature. What is that? A sea king? We're doomed. Nami's reaction was more of annoyance than fear. Her eyes narrowed, her teeth grinding together. Are you out of your mind, bringing something like that with us? We're supposed to be escaping, not attracting more attention. Luffy just laughed, completely at ease with the situation. That's just my pet eel. I told him to stay hidden until we needed him. He gestured to the creature, patting its side as if it were a harmless puppy. Good job, buddy. We're heading to the Marine base now. The Marine base? Kobe yelped, still staring wide-eyed at the giant eel. You mean where Zoro is? The one they're about to execute? Are you insane? Luffy simply nodded, his grin as wide as ever. Yep, I'm gonna recruit him into my crew. Nami pinched the bridge of her nose, exasperation seeping into her voice. First, you claim I'm gonna be your navigator without asking me, and now you want to go to a Marine base? On purpose? To rescue? Have you completely lost your mind? Luffy scratched his head, looking up at the sky as if thinking hard about it. Nope. I'm pretty sure this is a great plan. Zoro's strong, and I need strong people if I'm gonna become king of the pirates. Nami threw her hands up. I can't believe this. First a pet sea monster, now you want to break into a Marine base. What have I gotten myself into? Kobe, meanwhile, had gone pale, staring at the eel in terror. Wait, does that thing eat people? Luffy laughed, slapping the eel's side again. Nah, he's harmless, unless I tell him not to be. Kobe shuddered but didn't dare ask more. Instead, he turned to Nami. "Are you seriously going along with this? You seem smart." Nami crossed her arms, glaring at both Luffy and the horizon ahead. "I don't have much of a choice, do I? He's dragging me along whether I like it or not. But the second I get what I need, I'm out of here." Luffy, still grinning, turned toward the open sea. "Don't worry, Nami. You're gonna love being part of my crew. You'll be my navigator, and we'll have the best adventure ever." Nami just sighed, her expression a mix of irritation and begrudging acceptance. "We'll see about that." With that, they continued their journey, Nami steering them toward the marine base where Zoro was held. Luffy, Nami, and Kobe were finally sailing away from the wrecked ship, leaving the carnage behind. Kobe sat nervously beside him, still processing everything that had happened, while Nami was focused on navigating the small boat through the open water, her gaze fixed on the horizon. For a moment, the world felt calm, with nothing but the sound of the waves and the distant caw of seagulls filling the air. Luffy stood at the bow of the boat, staring out at the endless sea. His hand rested on his straw hat, and a small smile played on his lips. "All right. Now Nami's with me. That's 2. Just 9 more to go," he thought to himself, feeling the familiar surge of excitement building inside him. But then, the grin faded slightly as his mind drifted. "It won't go the same way this time. I'll recruit some new crewmates. Maybe Carrot, Pedro, Uta, and Pineapple Head. They'll all be part of my crew." Could already picture their faces, though some of them he hadn't even met yet. His eyes glimmered with anticipation, knowing that things would be different this time around. A sudden breeze caught his hat, forcing him to clutch it tighter. His gaze hardened as his thoughts shifted to the one person who weighed most on his heart. "But first, I have to save Ace. No matter what. This time, I'll make sure he lives. I won't let the Marines take him from me again." The memory of Ace's last moments flashed through his mind, but Luffy pushed it away. He couldn't dwell on the past. This time, he would change it. He would be stronger, faster, ready to do whatever it took. Glancing back over his shoulder, Luffy noticed Kobe staring off at the sea, wide-eyed and deep in thought. Luffy chuckled to himself, lightening the mood in his mind. Maybe I'll leave a message with Gramps to take care of him, and the butt-chin guy. He couldn't help but laugh, earning confused looks from both Nami and Kobe. Luffy waved them off with a grin. Nothing, he said, adjusting his hat once again. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear in his heart. He wouldn't let anyone he cared about slip away this time. As the boat sailed farther into the blue, the journey had just begun, and Luffy's heart raced with the thrill of the adventure ahead. Grinning at the thought that the world itself was an endless adventure just waiting to be seized. The sea beast, now gliding alongside them like a loyal companion, sent ripples through the water, a silent protector. Nami, focused on the horizon, felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. Even if she wasn't planning to stay with this reckless rubber man, she had to admit that the way they had escaped from Alvida's pirates was nothing short of miraculous. Her mind was already calculating their next moves. How they'd infiltrate the marine base, how to avoid being captured herself, and how to use the situation to her advantage. Kobe, still trembling slightly, couldn't stop glancing nervously at the massive eel. "I can't believe we're heading to the marine base. I mean, it's a death sentence, right? Zoro's the pirate hunter. What makes you think he'll join your crew, Luffy?" Luffy tilted his hat back, giving Kobe a confident look, because Zoro has a dream, and people with big dreams stick together. Nami raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. It was a curious thing to hear from someone who acted so carefree, but there was a strange weight behind Luffy's words. Despite everything, there was no doubt in her mind that he believed every single thing he said. The wind picked up as the boat sliced through the waves, the marine base now visible in the distance, a foreboding fortress jutting out from the land, surrounded by watchtowers and heavily armed ships. It was a place that sent shivers down the spine of any pirate, a symbol of the world government's absolute authority. But to Luffy, it was just another place to visit, another place to find the next member of his crew. He stood up, stretching his arms and flashing a bright grin. "Get ready. It's time to rescue Zoro." The afternoon sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the waters of Shellstown. Luffy, Nami, and Kobe sailed steadily toward the looming marine base. Towering beside their boat was the massive sea beast eel, its scales glistening like polished armor under the sunlight. With a low, rumbling growl, the creature sliced through the water effortlessly, keeping pace with their small vessel. "You know, we might need you in there, too," Luffy said, grinning up at the beast and giving its slick body an affectionate pat. "I bet the Marines would freak out if they saw you." The eel blinked down at him, tilting its head as if understanding every word, then rumbled a response that sounded almost like a chuckle. Kobe and Nami glanced nervously at each other, still uncertain how Luffy had managed to tame such a formidable creature, but its presence was oddly reassuring. However, the peace of the moment was quickly shattered by a familiar, loud grumbling, the sound of Luffy's stomach protesting its emptiness. "Are we almost there? I'm starving," Luffy complained for what felt like the 100th time, his voice echoing over the gentle lap of the waves against the boat. Nami, steering with a focused glare, shot back, "Shut up. You finished everything we had." Her exasperation was palpable as she hit Luffy's head. The endless complaints about hunger were unbearable. Kobe, seated at the edge of the boat, glanced nervously at Luffy-san, his heart pounding in his chest. "Luffy-san, do you think I could become a Marine one day?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, a hint of doubt creeping into his tone. He had always admired the bravery of Marines, but now he was uncertain about the path he had once dreamed of. Luffy turned to Kobe, his usual carefree grin lighting up his face. "Of course, just keep training. You'll get strong. Then you can do whatever you want." His enthusiasm was infectious, but Kobe couldn't shake the weight of uncertainty that hung over him like a dark cloud. As they drew closer to Shell's town, the imposing silhouette of the Marine base loomed in the distance, stark against the bright blue sky. Luffy's eyes sparkled with excitement. Finally, he shouted, practically vibrating with energy. Without waiting for the boat to fully dock, he leapt off and sprinted toward the base. "Zoro, we're here to save you." "Wait, Luffy," Nami called, her voice tinged with panic. She and Kobe exchanged worried glances, knowing Luffy's recklessness could lead them into serious trouble. Nami sighed and turned to Kobe. "Come on, let's try to keep up. He'll get himself killed if we don't hurry." They navigated through the Marine base's open gates and found themselves in the heart of the courtyard. Standing bound to a post in the center, the unmistakable figure of Roronoa Zoro, the pirate hunter, came into view. He looked worn and exhausted, but his posture remained unyielding, his gaze steady. As Luffy approached, Zoro's eyes narrowed in confusion. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice strained but laced with curiosity. "Monkey D. Luffy. I'll be the king of the pirates, and I'm here to save you so you can join my crew," Luffy proclaimed, grinning widely as if he had just declared the most exciting adventure of his life. "Help? I don't need your help. And why would I want to become a pirate?" Zoro shot back, his tone stubborn, though a hint of intrigue flickered in his eyes. Helmeppo stepped forward, a malicious glint in his eye. Well, if it isn't the infamous pirate hunter. "Do you think you can starve yourself out of this? You're looking rather pathetic," he taunted, relishing the moment. Zoro shot a glare at Helmeppo, determination flickering in his weary eyes. "Just wait until I'm free," he muttered. Kobe felt his heart sink. He thought they were here to help, but the malice in Helmeppo's words made it clear that the situation was dire. Nami's instincts flared. She didn't trust the way Helmeppo was looking at them, and a feeling of dread washed over her. "Did you see the notice my father posted today? Anyone caught aiding a criminal will be put to death," Helmeppo proclaimed, taking pleasure in the fear that spread across the courtyard. Luffy stepped forward, a fierce determination igniting in his eyes. "I won't let you hurt him," he yelled, clenching his fists, his resolve shining like a beacon. Helmeppo's smirk widened as he turned to the Marines stationed nearby. "You heard him, kill that kid, and finish off Zoro. I'm getting bored with this whole thing," he ordered, his voice dripping with malice. Zoro's eyes blazed with fury as he shot a glare at Helmeppo. "You broke your end of the deal, Helmeppo," he growled, voice low and dangerous. "I've endured 20 days of this, and you think you can just order the Marines to kill me? You won't get away with this?" As Luffy lunged forward, ready to tear the ropes binding Zoro, Helmeppo pulled out a pistol, aiming it directly at him. "That's not my name," he screamed while shooting. But Luffy suddenly felt an instinct awakening within him. His observation haki stirred from his fight with a foreign soul. He could sense Zoro's frustration and anger, fueling his resolve further. With a swift motion, he dodged to the side as Helmeppo fired, the bullets whizzing past him. "Is that all you've got?" Luffy taunted, a grin spreading across his face. He moved swiftly, dodging with ease as the bullet missed him by inches. "Gum Gum Pistol," he shouted, extending his arm and launching his fist forward. The punch connected squarely with Helmeppo's face, sending him crashing to the ground in a heap. Then, without missing a beat, Luffy followed up with a Gum Gum Whip, kicking the nearest marine aside. Zoro gasped, Nami's heart racing. "What was that? How did you do that?" she exclaimed, staring at Luffy with a mixture of disbelief and awe, while she and Kobe thought that what they saw when Luffy fought Alvida wasn't a hallucination. Luffy shrugged nonchalantly, his grin never fading. "I ate a devil fruit. It's called the Gum Gum fruit, so now I'm a rubber man," he said, his voice brimming with confidence. Nami, Zoro, Kobe, and the rest of the Marines exclaimed, "Devil fruits are real." He stretched his face and said, "Yes, see?" while laughing at their reaction. The Marines nearby hesitated, exchanging fearful glances, their eyes widening with shock at the display of Luffy's power. He turned back to Zoro with a gleam of excitement in his eyes. "Kobe, untie him. Nami. Zoro's swords are in the Ass-Chin guy's room, hurry." As Kobe rushed to Zoro's side and began working at the knots around his wrists, Nami darted toward the base's main building. She weaved through the hallways, finally reaching Helmeppo's quarters. She pushed open the door and paused, her eyes widening in surprise. The room was decorated in shades of pink, with lace and delicate floral patterns, more fitting for a young girl's room than that of a marine's son. She spotted the swords resting on a pink satin bedspread and snatched them up, hurrying to Morgan's office while everyone was distracted by the chaos Luffy made to find the Grand Line map. When she finally reached Morgan's office, she started to search for a safe. When she opened the safe, she found it empty except for Buggy's flag. She looked at the empty safe again and screamed angrily into the air, "Buggy!" Meanwhile, in the courtyard, heavy footsteps echoed as Captain Morgan stormed forward, his imposing figure cutting an intimidating sight. His axe hand gleamed under the afternoon sun, and his expression was twisted in fury. "Who dares to disrupt my Marines?" he bellowed, his voice booming like thunder. "You think you can waltz in here and challenge me? I'll chop you down before you can even draw breath." Luffy, undeterred by the massive figure before him, raised an eyebrow and grinned. "I'm Monkey D. Luffy. I'll be the king of the pirates, and you're just another obstacle in my way." Morgan's laughter echoed through the courtyard, deep and mocking. "A pirate, huh? Do you think you're tough because you landed a lucky piece? See how you fare against me?" With a swift motion, Morgan brandished his axe hand, the blade gleaming ominously as he charged at Luffy. Luffy quickly sidestepped, dodging the powerful swing that cleaved through the air, leaving a deep gash in the ground. "Is that all you've got?" Luffy taunted, his confidence unwavering. He focused, feeling his observation haki kick in as he anticipated Morgan's next move. The captain swung again, but Luffy was ready, ducking just in time. "Gum Gum Pistol!" Luffy shouted, launching his fist forward. The punch connected with Morgan's jaw, sending the imposing captain stumbling back. But Morgan, with his iron jaw, shook off the blow and retaliated with a fierce counter swing from his axe hand. Luffy dodged again, rolling to the side. "If you want to become the world's greatest swordsman, then come with me," Luffy called out to Zoro, trying to rally him. "And how do you know I want to become the world's greatest swordsman?" Zoro replied, surprise flickering in his eyes amidst the battle. Morgan growled, angered by their banter. "Enough of this nonsense. You're both going down." He lunged again, his axe hand poised to strike. Luffy, feeling the thrill of battle coursing through him, readied himself for one final blow. "You want to know, and get your swords back, you have to join me," he declared, determination burning in his eyes. Zoro narrowed his gaze, his stubbornness flaring, but before he said anything, Morgan sneered, "You're nothing but a foolish pirate. I'll crush you myself." With a swift swing of his axe, Morgan lunged at Luffy. Luffy countered with a swift, Gum Gum Pistol. His punch connected with Morgan's stomach, sending the captain back to the Marine base and crashing into it. The Marines in the courtyard froze, staring in shock at their fallen captain. Then, almost in unison, they erupted in cheers. Morgan's tyranny had ended, and the weight of his oppression lifted from their shoulders. With the battle over, Kobe had finally managed to fully untie Zoro, who rubbed his wrists, looking between Luffy and his reclaimed swords that Nami held out to him. He hesitated, clearly sizing up the strange pirate who had just risked everything for him. "Listen, Luffy-san. I'm not interested in being a pirate. I want to become the world's greatest swordsman on my terms," Zoro said, his voice firm. Luffy shrugged, unfazed. "Fine by me. You'll still need these swords if you want to chase your dream, right?" He gestured to the swords in Nami's hands. Zoro narrowed his eyes. "That's blackmail." "So," Luffy replied, smiling. After a long pause, Zoro finally took his swords from Nami, feeling their familiar weight in his hands. "All right. But remember this. If you ever stand in the way of my ambition, you'll have to answer to my blade. And if that day comes, you'd better commit seppuku." Luffy laughed, his eyes shining with excitement. "Deal?" The king of the pirates wouldn't need any less than that from his crew. With a nod, Zoro sheathed his swords. His stance finally relaxed as he accepted his new path. And so, while Shellstown's Marines. As the cheers of the liberated townspeople echoed in the background, Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Kobe made their way to the cozy little restaurant run by the mother and daughter duo that Zoro had saved during his fateful encounter with Helmeppo. The aroma of delicious food wafted through the air, a welcome reprieve after the chaos of the day. As they entered, the mother, Ririka, looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening in surprise. "Zoro, you're back," she exclaimed, rushing around the counter to embrace him. "We were so worried about you." Zoro chuckled softly, a rare smile crossing his lips. "I'm fine. Just had a bit of an adventure." The daughter, Rika, peeked out from the kitchen, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Are you a pirate now?" she asked, glancing curiously at Luffy, who stood beside Zoro, brimming with energy. "Yep. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm going to be the king of the pirates," he declared, puffing out his chest proudly. Rika clapped her hands in delight. "Wow, a real pirate. Can you take me with you?" Nami, who had been rolling her eyes at Luffy's antics, couldn't help but smile. "You'd better ask your mother first," she said teasingly. Ririka laughed, shaking her head. "I don't think I could let my daughter sail off with a bunch of pirates just yet," she said, her eyes twinkling with mirth. As the crew settled into a corner table, Kobe couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. "What's next for you guys? Are you really going to continue being pirates after all this?" Luffy grinned widely, his excitement infectious. "Of course. We have to go to the Grand Line and find the One Piece and go on epic adventures. But first, we need food," his stomach growled loudly, echoing his insistence. Ririka and her daughter Rika quickly brought out platters of steaming rice, fish, and an assortment of vegetables. The crew dug in, grateful for the delicious meal after the chaos. Zoro, now armed with his swords again, relished every bite. "Thanks for this. I owe you," he said, looking at Ririka and her daughter with gratitude. Rika smiled brightly. "You saved my mom. You're my hero," she exclaimed, eyes wide with admiration. Zoro's expression soured, and he shook his head, disgust evident on his face. "I'm no hero. I'm a pirate." Luffy nodded in agreement, clearly agreeing with Zoro's response, while Kobe and Nami exchanged confused glances. After a moment of silence, Kobe finally spoke up. "I wish I could join you on the Grand Line," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Luffy leaned forward, his eyes shining with determination. "You can, Kobe. You just have to work hard and train. One day, you'll be a great Marine." Just then, Ririka interrupted, looking serious. "I've heard stories about pirates in the Grand Line. You need to be careful, it's a dangerous place." "I know, that's why we'll become the strongest," Luffy replied confidently, his enthusiasm infectious. As they finished their meal, Luffy suddenly jumped to his feet, eyes gleaming with mischief. "All right, everyone, we need to get going. We need to go get Usopp." Before he could continue, Nami cut in. "First, we need to go after Buggy to get the Grand Line map." Luffy looked confused, scratching his head as he tried to recall their next steps. Wait, Buggy. After saving Zoro, where were we supposed to go again? He pondered for a moment, the gears in his mind turning. Then it struck him. The dog and that red-nosed idiot, Buggy. Just as he was about to dive deeper into his thoughts, the door to the restaurant swung open with a loud bang. As they gathered their courage, the door to the restaurant swung open with a loud bang. A group of Marines entered, led by a tan man whose hand was tucked behind his back. A Marine hat shaded his eyes, lending him an air of authority. "Is it true that you are pirates?" he began, his tone dripping with skepticism. Luffy's grin widened, his confidence unwavering. "Yeah, we are the Straw Hat Pirates," he declared proudly, puffing out his chest as he spoke. Nami glanced nervously at Kobe, who swallowed hard, clearly unsettled by the sudden confrontation. But before anyone could react, Luffy stood up, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I forgot," he exclaimed, turning toward the tan marine with a playful grin. "Hey, can I use your den mushi for a bit? I want to call my grandpa." The tan marine raised an eyebrow, momentarily taken aback by Luffy's casual demeanor. "What are you?" "Just think about it. What if he finds out I'm a pirate?" Luffy interrupted, feigning seriousness. "He might come down here and give you a real headache." The Marine's expression hardened, his patience thinning. "You think this is a game, pirate?" Luffy leaned forward, undeterred. "Of course, it isn't, but it could be more fun if I could get a call through." Nami and Kobe exchanged bewildered looks, unsure of how this would play out. Zoro merely rolled his eyes, arms crossed, bemused by Luffy's antics. "Enough with thine," barked, irritation evident in his voice. "You think you can just walk in here and make demands?" Luffy shrugged, a cheeky smile still plastered on his face. "Well, I was hoping you'd be a nice guy about it. After all, I'm going to call Monkey D. Garp. She. "What?" Nami, Kobe, and the other Marines gasped in unison, their eyes widening in shock. "You're the grandson of Marine hero Garp the Fist." While everyone was stunned into silence, Luffy casually picked his nose, responding with a nonchalant, "Yes." Then, with mischievous glints in his eyes and a playful smile, he pressed on, "So, do I get the call now or not?" The tan Marine, still processing the revelation, hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. "Get a den mushi here," he ordered one of his men, who scrambled to comply. As the Marine stepped back, trying to regain his composure, Luffy's grin widened, clearly enjoying the chaos he had just unleashed. Nami and Kobe exchanged incredulous looks, their minds racing at the implications of Luffy's lineage. "I can't believe this," Kobe whispered, his eyes darting between Luffy-san and the Marines. "You're related to one of the strongest Marines out there." "Yep. So you'd better be nice to me," Luffy replied, winking playfully at the tan Marine, who could only glare in response, clearly torn between confusion and frustration. As the den mushi was brought forward, its snail-like eyes blinked curiously, and the receiver was handed to Luffy. He held it up with a casual air as if he were about to chat with an old friend rather than one of the most formidable figures in the Marines. "Hey, Gramps," Luffy greeted, his voice cheerful and unbothered by the weight of the revelation he had just dropped. "It's me, Luffy." On the other end, the voice of Vice Admiral Garp boomed through the receiver, a mix of gruffness and affection. "Luffy, what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into this time, huh?" Luffy chuckled, unfazed by the question. "Oh, you know, the usual. Just hanging out with some Marines. They seem pretty surprised to hear about you." Garp's laughter echoed through the den mushi, hearty and full of life. "I bet they are. You always know how to stir things up, don't you, boy?" Nami and Kobe listened intently, their expressions a mix of disbelief and curiosity. The tan Marine, still trying to process the situation, watched the exchange with a wary eye. "So, Gramps," Luffy continued, his tone turning slightly more serious, "I'm a pirate now, and I'm going to be the king of the pirates. So instead of me joining the Marines, I got you someone else. His name's Kobe and there's another guy, his name is Helmeppo. So, see ya." With that, Luffy abruptly ended the call, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead as he realized the boldness of his words. The den mushi's eyes closed, signaling the end of the conversation. The courtyard was silent for a moment, the weight of Luffy's declaration hanging in the air. Kobe looked both flustered and determined, while the tan Marine seemed caught between disbelief and a grudging respect for the young pirate's audacity. Luffy, as always, remained unfazed, his grin wide and his spirit unbroken, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with his usual enthusiasm and confidence. Just as the Den Den Mushi clicked off, the silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of Garp's booming voice, as if his sheer presence could transcend the device. "Luffy, you little brat," Garp's voice roared, echoing in the minds of those who knew him well. "You think you can just hang up on me like that? And what's this nonsense about being a pirate king?" Luffy, despite the distance, could almost feel the intensity of his grandfather's frustration. He scratched his head sheepishly, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips. "Hey, Gramps is really mad this time," he admitted to his crew, though his grin never faltered. Nami and Kobe exchanged worried glances, well aware of Garp's formidable reputation and the strength behind his anger. The Tan Marine, too, seemed to brace himself, as if expecting Garp's wrath to somehow manifest in their midst. Garp's voice, though distant, carried a mix of anger and a begrudging affection. "You better watch your back, Luffy, I'm not done with you yet." Despite the threat, there was an underlying tone of care in Garp's words, a testament to the complicated yet loving relationship between the two. Luffy, ever the optimist, took it all in stride, ready to face whatever consequences his actions might bring, confident in his path and his dreams. And then Luffy turns to Nami and Zoro and says, "Let's go, crew, next adventure Red Nose Buggy." As they stepped outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The townspeople waved them off, gratitude etched on their faces, their voices a distant chorus of well wishes. With Zoro now officially part of the crew, Luffy couldn't help but feel that their journey was only just beginning. The thrill of adventure awaited them, and he was ready to seize every moment. Standing at the edge of the boat, a wide grin spread across Luffy's face as he turned to Kobe, who was still processing everything that had just happened. "Hey, Kobe. You've got to train hard and become a great Marine. Promise me you'll go after your dreams." Kobe, eyes shining with determination, nodded vigorously. "I will, Luffy-san. I won't let you down." Just then, Zoro, still adjusting to his newfound freedom, tried to hop onto the boat. His sudden movement caught everyone off guard, and he almost lost his balance. Luffy laughed, watching as Zoro stumbled. "Careful, swordsman. We don't want you falling into the water," Nami chimed in, a teasing smile on her face. Suddenly, with a powerful splash, Eel, the massive sea beast, surfaced beside the boat, his shimmering body glistening in the sunlight. The sight was so unexpected that both Zoro and the remaining Marines froze in shock. Zoro's eyes widened, his usual stoic expression giving way to disbelief. "What in the world is that?" he exclaimed, taken aback. Luffy, grinning from ear to ear, pointed at Eel. "Hey, Eel, grab some water for Zoro." The massive creature responded with a playful flick of his tail, creating waves that rocked the boat. The Marines stared in astonishment, some even stepping back as they witnessed the enormous sea beast. It was a sight they had never anticipated, an ally like no other. Eel dove deep, surfacing again with a cascade of water that splashed over the deck, soaking Zoro and startling him even more. His swordsmanship instincts kicked in, and he instinctively raised a hand to shield himself, eyes wide. "You got to be kidding me." Luffy just chuckled, shaking his head at the creature's antics. "See, Zoro? No need to worry about water now." As they prepared to sail away, Luffy turned back to Kobe one last time. "All right, time to go, but remember, we'll meet again." With a bittersweet smile, Kobe raised his hand in a salute. "Yes, Luffy-san." Luffy waved back enthusiastically, a promise hanging in the air. Before Eel dived deep into the sea, Luffy stopped him with a resolute expression. "Eel, you've been awesome, but you should go back to the village and protect it until I return." Eel's eyes seemed to convey a hint of worry. Luffy sensed it. "What if I don't see you again?" Luffy, smiling confidently, replied, "You will. When I become the king of the pirates, I'll come back to visit, so keep waiting for me, alright?" Eel's eyes sparkled with determination. "I will. Good luck, Luffy." As Eel splashed back into the sea, the Marines finally snapped out of their daze, murmuring among themselves, confusion and disbelief written across their faces. Luffy took a deep breath, feeling the thrill of adventure pulse through him. Let's go find more friends, and then we'll chase our dreams together. With that, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami set sail on their next adventure, leaving Shell's town behind and stepping into the unknown, hearts filled with excitement for what lay ahead. After a day at sea, the sun hung high in the sky as the crew finally reached their destination, Orangetown. Luffy, with his usual enthusiasm, led them to see Chow Chow, the loyal dog who had become a symbol of resilience and loyalty. The pet food shop, which Chow Chow considered his last relic and treasure from his deceased owner, still stood intact. Chow Chow sat faithfully in front of the store, guarding it from any lingering threats of Buggy's pirates. Luffy immediately approached Chow Chow, crouching down to pat the loyal dog on the head. They shared a moment of understanding and respect. "You're a good boy, Chow Chow," Luffy said with a grin, appreciating the dog's dedication. Nami and Zoro watched the interaction, puzzled. Nami crossed her arms, smirking. "Luffy, are you making friends with every animal we meet?" she teased. Zoro chuckled, adding, "Next thing you know, he'll be talking to seagulls." Luffy laughed. "Hey, seagulls are great listeners." After a moment of silence, Nami and Zoro exchanged puzzled glances. Luffy had led them to a seemingly ordinary pet food shop, where a dog sat vigilantly at the entrance. The dog's unwavering gaze and the way Luffy interacted with him piqued their curiosity. "Hey, Luffy," Nami began, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Why did you bring us here? What's so special about this dog in this shop?" Zoro nodded in agreement, crossing his arms. "Yeah, and how do you know about this place? You seem to know a lot more than you let on." Luffy grinned, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "This is Chow Chow. He's guarding this pet food shop, which was his owner's. Even after his owner passed away, Chow Chow stayed here to protect it from Buggy's pirates." Nami and Zoro exchanged another glance, their curiosity deepening. Nami decided to voice the questions that had been nagging at her. "Luffy, how do you know so much about us? You knew my name and that I'm a navigator before I even told you. And Zoro's dream. You seem to know that too." Zoro nodded, his expression serious. "Yeah, it's like you have some kind of sixth sense or something. How do you know all this stuff?" Luffy chuckled, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Do you want to know? Do you want to know?" Nami leaned in, intrigued. "Yes, I do." Luffy burst into laughter, his signature carefree spirit shining through. "I don't want to tell you, she. Nami rolled her eyes, a mix of exasperation, slight anger, and amusement on her face. "You're impossible, Luffy." Zoro smirked, shaking his head. "Figures. I should have known you'd pull something like that." Despite their initial frustration, Nami and Zoro couldn't help but smile at Luffy's playful nature. It was moments like these that reminded them why they had chosen to follow him on this unpredictable journey. As they stood together, watching Chow Chow guard his beloved shop, the crew felt a sense of camaraderie growing among them. Despite the mysteries and uncertainties, they knew they were part of something special. A crew bound by trust, adventure, and the promise of new beginnings. With a renewed sense of purpose, the crew finally set off toward the Buggy Pirates camp, determined to put an end to their terror in Orangetown. Luffy led the way, his usual enthusiasm infectious. "Let's go kick some pirate butt," he exclaimed, pumping his fist in the air. As they reached the camp, Luffy's voice boomed through the air. "Come out, you big nose." His comrades Zoro and Nami stood beside him, brimming with anticipation. Moments later, Buggy emerged, his face twisted in fury. "Who are you calling big nose, you straw hat bastard?" he bellowed, brandishing a finger at Luffy, Zoro, and Nami from atop a nearby pub. "Flashily fire the buggy ball." "Great, now he's mad," Nami muttered, slapping Luffy on the head in exasperation. "Why did you say that, you idiot?" she scolded, quickly moving out of the line of fire. "Hey, Luffy, run!" Zoro shouted, sensing the imminent danger. Just then, Buggy and Luffy spoke in unison. Luffy, brimming with confidence, declared, "That won't work on me." Meanwhile, Buggy roared, "Time to blow out." "Gum gum balloon." Luffy shouted as he inhaled deeply, his body inflating comically. The cannonball shot towards him, but instead of hitting him, it bounced harmlessly off, sending everyone else reeling in shock. Luffy rocketed towards Buggy and his crew, a wide grin plastered across his face. Buggy's eyes widened in disbelief. No, 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 not the Buggy ball, he stammered, but it was too late. The cannonball exploded, showering debris everywhere as Luffy deflated to his usual shape. Is that a devil fruit? Came a voice from the wreckage. The dust settled, revealing Buggy holding Moji in his right hand and another random pirate in his left, while Kabaji clung to Richie, the lion, to shield himself from the chaos. Basically the fight from the anime. Luffy looked at Buggy in disgust for using his men as human shields, while Nami shot a concerned glance at him. Captain, allow me to kill these worms, Kabaji sneered, standing next to Buggy. Very well then, Kabaji, Buggy replied with a wave, and Kabaji pulled a sword from his mouth before hopping onto a unicycle. He sped towards Luffy, intent on skewering him, only for Zoro to leap in front and block the attack with his blade. If you're a swordsman, your fight is with me, Zoro said, glaring at Kabaji with a steely resolve. Roronoa Zoro, Kabaji smirked. Defeating you will boost our reputation. He pulled down his scarf and breathed fire into Zoro's face, causing the swordsman to back off momentarily. The clash began, Kabaji performing circus tricks and utilizing spinning tops, while Zoro effortlessly deflected each attack, looking bored as the fight dragged on. Are you going to fight, or just do tricks all day? Zoro asked, his patience wearing thin. Meanwhile, Nami had quietly snuck off, eyeing Buggy's treasure with greedy intent. Don't worry, I'll finish you off with my greatest attack, Kabaji boasted, speeding off toward a nearby building. He rode up the side and launched himself high into the air, aiming to strike Zoro down. However, Buggy, in a desperate attempt to keep Zoro occupied, sent his hand flying toward him. Ah! Buggy screamed as Luffy stomped down on it, crushing his fingers and sending Buggy's hand scrambling back to him. Hands off Zoro's fight, big nose, Luffy declared, smirking at Buggy's predicament. WHO has a big nose, Buggy screamed, anger boiling over as Zoro dodged Kabaji's attack with ease. Enough games, Zoro growled, readying himself for a decisive strike. Fine, I'll finish you off with my swordsmanship, Kabaji yelled, charging at Zoro. Oni! Jiri, Zoro called, unleashing a powerful slash that incapacitated Kabaji in one fell swoop. The Buggy pirates. Lost too. This trash? Kabaji gasped before collapsing, his pride shattered. We're not trash. We're pirates, Zoro replied, sheathing his swords with a determined glint in his eyes. Enough! Buggy roared, pulling out daggers with his remaining hand. I don't care what you are, you're all going to die by my hands, he shouted, chop chop cannon, as his hand flew toward Luffy, ready to slice him. What the? Zoro exclaimed, eyes wide in disbelief as Luffy sidestepped the attack just in time. Buggy laughed maniacally. The chop chop fruit. I can never be killed by a sword. Luffy merely smirked and vanished, leaving Buggy looking around for him in confusion. Up here, Luffy called from a rooftop behind Buggy. Buggy fumed, his anger rising. Hold still, Straw Hat, he bellowed, launching himself at Luffy again, only for Luffy to disappear once more and reappear back where Buggy was. Why can't you stay still? Buggy shouted in frustration. He looked up and noticed Luffy's straw hat. That hat of yours reminds me of that blasted red-haired. You mean Shanks? Luffy interjected, bracing himself for Buggy's inevitable tirade. This is his hat. He gave it to me. I promised to return it to him one day. No wonder that hat pisses me off, Buggy shouted, about his past with Shanks, detailing how he lost his treasure map and ability to swim after Shanks saved him from drowning. Doesn't that mean Shanks saved your ass? Zoro chimed in, intrigued. Not my point, Buggy screamed. Because of Shanks, I'll never get the treasure in the sea, so I'll take all the treasure on land. Just then, Buggy's attention shifted as he spotted Nami, who was sneaking away with his treasure slung over her shoulder. You dare steal from me, Nami? He screeched, charging after her. Crap, he saw me, Nami yelped, sprinting away as Buggy pursued her. Unbeknownst to Buggy, Luffy was stealthily approaching his lower half. In an instant, Buggy was a foot away from Nami when he suddenly stopped, his face contorted in agony. Nami opened her eyes cautiously and saw Buggy frozen in place. She turned to see Luffy, who had just kicked Buggy in the nuts, a cheeky grin plastered on his face. "Your fight is with me, Buggy," Luffy said, stepping forward. He made sure not to use all his strength. Even enemies deserved some mercy. Ouch. Zoro winced, a smirk tugging at his lips, not feeling sorry for Buggy at all. Buggy floated into the air again, a look of sheer rage on his face. "Time to finish you all off, chop chop." "Festival," he screamed as he chased after Nami to reclaim his treasure. Luffy scanned the ground and grinned mischievously as he spotted Buggy's feet. He scooped them up, squeezing them in a death grip. Buggy's scream of pain echoed as Luffy hurled his feet at him, one foot getting stuck in his mouth while the other slammed against his face, sending Buggy crashing into the treasure bag Nami had been collecting. All of Buggy's pieces went limp, and Luffy burst into laughter. As Buggy groggily pried his foot out of his mouth, he looked around in horror at his scattered body parts. "Blah. I think I stepped in something," Buggy coughed, glaring at Luffy with newfound hatred. "You bastard, chop chop reassemble," he shouted, trying to call his disassembled body parts back, but only managing to retrieve his head, only to end up with his head, hands, and feet. "Ah, what happened to me?" "Hey, Buggy," Nami called. Everyone looked to see her with her foot keeping Buggy's tied-up parts in place. "Missing something?" "My parts. Give them back, you witch." "All right. Say goodbye, Buggy," Luffy yelled as he stretched his arms back before running towards Buggy. Buggy screamed in terror as Luffy's arm came forward. Gum Guum bazooka. And like the first time, Buggy was sent flying off into the distance. "Finally. That guy was giving me a headache with all that talking," Zoro said as he walked over to Luffy. Luffy stared off at where Buggy flew while Nami gathered the treasure in two smaller bags before joining them both and pulling out the Grand Line chart. "All right. I've got Buggy's treasure and the chart, so we're ready to leave whenever you two," she said as she hugged her treasure close to her. They were about to leave but were stopped when they heard footsteps behind, turned to see the townspeople returning, armed and ready to defend their home. However, the scene before them was not what they expected. The remnants of Buggy's crew were scattered, and Buggy himself was nowhere to be seen. The leader of the group, an elderly man with a determined expression, stepped forward, his eyes scanning the area. "What happened here?" he asked, his voice a mix of caution and curiosity. Luffy, Zoro, and Nami exchanged glances before Luffy stepped forward with his usual carefree grin. "We took care of Buggy and his crew for you," he announced proudly, pointing a thumb at himself. The townspeople murmured among themselves, their expressions shifting from suspicion to relief. The elderly man Boodle, who seemed to be the mayor, nodded slowly. "So, you defeated Buggy?" he asked, his tone softening. "Yep. Sent him flying," Luffy replied, mimicking the motion with his hand. The mayor's eyes widened in surprise, and then a smile broke across his face. "You saved our town," he exclaimed, his voice filled with gratitude. Thank you so much." The townspeople erupted into cheers, their weapons lowered as they rushed forward to express their thanks. "You three have done us a great service," Boodle said, his voice choked with emotion. "We owe you our freedom." Nami, ever practical, couldn't help but smile at the praise. "Well, it was a team effort," she said, glancing at her crewmates. Zoro nodded, a rare smile on his face. "Just doing what needed to be done." Luffy, ever the optimist, laughed, and he had fun doing it. The townspeople insisted on throwing a celebration in their honor, and soon the square was filled with music, food, and laughter. As the festivities continued, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami found themselves surrounded by grateful townsfolk, each eager to share their thanks and stories. As the night wore on, the Straw Hat crew sat together, enjoying the feast and the company of their new friends. They knew that more adventures awaited them on the Grand Line, but for now, they were content to bask in the warmth of camaraderie and the joy of a hard-fought victory. Nami raised her glass, smiling at her crewmates. "To new adventures and more treasure," she toasted. Zoro nodded, a rare smile on his face. "And to kick more pirate butt," he added. Luffy, with a mouthful of food, grinned widely. "And to make more friends along the way," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm infectious. The crew laughed, their camaraderie stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead on their journey. The crew laughed, their camaraderie stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead on their journey. Next morning as the sun rose, casting a golden hue over the ocean, the crew busied themselves with restocking the boat. The sail, now painted with Buggy's flag, fluttered gently in the morning breeze. Nami, Zoro, and Luffy worked together. Nami paused, wiping her brow, and looked over at Luffy. "So, where's our next destination?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of curiosity. Luffy, with his usual enthusiasm, replied, "Usopp Island." Nami sighed, a tired smile on her face. "And I'm asking, where is this Usopp Island?" she retorted, her tone playful yet exasperated. Zoro, overhearing the exchange, chuckled from where he was organizing supplies. "Sounds like another one of Luffy's made-up names," he teased. Luffy, seemingly lost in thought, stared off into the distance. His mind raced as he tried to recall the correct name. The name Usopp Island is S. Sigh. He pondered, his brow furrowing and face becoming light red in concentration. Suddenly, a light bulb seemed to go off in his head, and he cried out, "Syrup Village." Nami and Zoro exchanged amused glances, their captain's antics never failing to entertain them, despite the challenges they faced. Moments like these reminded them of the joy and unpredictability of their journey together. With their supplies restocked and their course set, the boat sailed onward. As they departed, Boodle, Chow Chow, and the rest of the townsfolk gathered at the shoreline, waving their hands in farewell. "Goodbye. Thank you for saving our town," they called out, their voices filled with gratitude and warmth. Luffy, Nami, and Zoro stood at the ship's railing, waving back with smiles on their faces. The bonds they had formed with the people of the town were a testament to the impact of their adventures, leaving behind not just memories but also friendships. As the island grew smaller in the distance, the crew felt a renewed sense of purpose. The open sea stretched out before them, promising new challenges and discoveries. With Syrup Village as their next destination, they were ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, united by their shared dreams and unwavering camaraderie. Nami stood at the bow, her heart heavy with the weight of her dilemma. The recent victory against Buggy the Clown had brought them treasure and a crucial map, yet her mind was consumed by the secrets she carried. She had joined Luffy's crew with the inn to gather enough money to buy back her village from Arlong's clutches. But as she spent more time with them, she found herself questioning her motives. Luffy's carefree nature and unwavering belief in his friends had a way of breaking down the walls she had built around her heart. However, the revelation that he was the grandson of Monkey D. Garp, the legendary marine hero, had sent shockwaves through her. Could she trust him with her secret? She didn't want him fighting Arlong, as she feared he wasn't yet strong enough to face him. But if she asked him to seek his grandfather's help, would he see her as just another thief, a liar who had deceived him and his crew? The fear of rejection, of losing the fragile bonds she had formed, was almost paralyzing. A small part of her selfishly wished to forget everything and continue sailing with them, but she couldn't forget her sister Najiko, her father figure Genzo, and the rest of the villagers who depended on her. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. Looking behind her, she found Luffy walking toward her. "Hey, Nami," Luffy called out with a serious look, his straw hat casting a shadow over his eyes. "We need to talk." Nami hesitated, her heart a tumult of emotions. She had always been the navigator, the one who charted the course and kept everyone on track. But now, she felt lost in her own sea of doubts. "About what?" Nami asked, confused and shakily. Luffy stopped a few steps away from her, his expression unusually serious. "I know about Arlong and what he's doing to your village," he said quietly. Nami's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected him to know about Arlong Park and the terror it brought to her home. Her heart raced as she tried to process his words. How did you find out?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll tell you, but not now," Luffy said with determined eyes. "When then?" Nami asked. Luffy replied, "When I gather our crew together. We are 3 now, and 7 to go." Nami felt a rush of vulnerability wash over her. I didn't want you to know. I thought I could handle it alone," she admitted, her voice trembling. The weight of her secrets felt heavier now that Luffy was aware. Luffy stepped closer, his eyes filled with determination. "You don't have to face it alone, Nami. We're a crew, and we look out for each other. If Arlong is hurting your village, then we need to do something about it." "But you don't understand," Nami said, frustration bubbling up. "Arlong is powerful. He's not just some petty thief. If you confront him without a plan, it could end badly." Luffy's expression softened. "We can figure it out together. I don't care if he's strong. I want to help you." Nami stared at him, the sincerity in his words piercing through her doubts. She felt the familiar ache of longing for freedom and safety for her village. But the fear of endangering Luffy and the crew made her hesitate. "You're worried about us, aren't you?" Luffy interjected, tilting his head slightly. "But you're not alone anymore. Trust me. Let us help you. That's what friends do." For a moment, Nami was speechless, grappling with the warmth of his unwavering support. She had always carried the burden of protecting her loved ones alone. But Luffy was offering her something she had never truly accepted: partnership. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. "I just don't want to lose you all," she confessed, her voice cracking. Luffy hugged her and told her that everything was going to be okay. "If we fail, we can always call my Gramps to come and clean up Arlong," he said with a light laugh. Just then, Zoro appeared, having overheard the conversation. "So, where to next, Captain?" he asked, his voice steady and confident. Luffy grinned, his eyes shining with determination. "First, we gather more nakama," he declared, using the word for comrades that held so much meaning for them. "And then, we take down Arlong and free your village." Nami felt a renewed sense of hope. With Luffy, Zoro, and the rest of the crew by her side, she believed they could face anything together. As they stood together at the bow of the ship, the sun setting on the horizon, Nami felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in a long time. With her friends by her side, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that they would fight for each other and the freedom of her village. Together, they would chart a new course, one filled with adventure, friendship, and the promise of a brighter future. The sun, a benevolent eye in the cerulean sky, smiled down on Syrup Village. Brightly colored houses and jewels spilled across a velvet hillside, nestled amongst gentle slopes. Two paths, a brisk 3-minute run apart, snaked up from the shoreline, the only access points between towering cliffs. A fragile peace reigned, about to be shattered. A skinny boy with goggles perched on his head and a slingshot casually slung over his left wrist sprinted through the cobbled streets, his long nose a frantic herald. This was Usopp, the village liar and self-proclaimed captain of the Usopp Pirates, current membership. "Usopp, Onion, Pepper, and Carrot," he shrieked. "Pirates, pirates are coming. Run for your lives." His lungs burning, he skidded to a halt, gasping. "The pirates are," a flying pot interrupted, connecting with the back of his head. Stars exploded. He staggered, turning to face the villagers. A wave of disgruntled faces brandishing brooms, pans, mops, and the baker's wife's menacing rolling pin. "Usopp," a burly farmer roared. "How many times must we tell you to stop these pranks?" But they were real this time," Usopp stammered, clutching his head. "Big ship, black sails, skull and crossbones." The baker's wife scoffed. "Oh, and I suppose Captain One Leg and his parrot were there too?" Usopp knew he was beaten. "Maybe I exaggerated," he mumbled. The villagers dispersed, grumbling. Usopp, however, remained, a frown etching his brow. He stood on a southern cliff overlooking the sparkling sea. A nagging feeling persisted. He had seen something, a flicker of mast, a glint of metal, a chilling premonition. He dismissed it as paranoia. Just then, two children, around 9 years old, appeared. Pepper, a boy with dark hair wearing a pepper-shaped hat and a light green shirt bearing the Usopp Pirates' Jolly Roger, and Carrot, a freckled boy with short, spiky purple hair covering his eyes and a red hat, spoke simultaneously. "Good morning, Captain. The Usopp Pirates are here." Before Usopp could respond, another child, Onion, with brown hair in a distinctive onion-like tuft and tiny eyes, burst onto the scene shouting, "Terrible news! Pirates! Their boat has a skull mark, North Shore." Usopp, skeptical, scoffed, "That's a lie, Onion," tears welling from his run across the village, insisted, "It's the truth." Immediately upon realizing that Onion was telling the truth, Usopp's first instinct was to flee. "Snack time," he yelled, starting to sprint. However, Carrot and Pepper cried out simultaneously, "Liar!" and "Don't run away," halting his escape. Then Onion added, "If I recall correctly, it's Buggy the Clown's mark." This revelation instilled a mixture of fear and recognition in Usopp, Pepper, and Carrot, momentarily freezing them in place. Onion continued, "But I just saw 3 shadows." Usopp, some his courage, declared with newfound spirit, "Yosh, let's go, Usopp pirates, let's protect the village." Meanwhile, sometime after leaving Orange Town, the Straw Hat Pirates enjoyed a rare moment of calm aboard their newly acquired vessel. A small, battered ship commandeered from Buggy the Clown. Luffy munched on an apple, Zoro rested, and Nami meticulously checked their course. Luffy stretched. "Meat? I'm starving." Zoro, eyes half closed, grumbled, "We ate 2 hours ago." Nami, rolling her eyes, said, "And you're still eating, Luffy. We're nearing Gecko Island. Or, as someone keeps calling it, Syrup Village." Luffy's eyes lit up. "Syrup Village, Gecko Island, Luffy," Nami sighed. "It took forever to find this place, even with the correct name." Luffy frowned, "But I swear it was Syrup Village." "We can't continue like this," Nami stated firmly. "This crew, our provisions, and this tiny ship are completely inadequate for what lies ahead." "You're right," Luffy agreed, apple still in his mouth. "We need meat," while also thinking to himself, "Usopp, going merry, and Sanji. And some booze," Zoro mumbled. "We need far more than that, you idiots," Nami exclaimed, returning to her charts. Luffy, however, smiled, already anticipating new adventures. They landed on the north shore. Luffy leapt onto the sand before Nami even beached the boat. Zoro stretched. "Nice to be back on land," he said. "Yeah. Now, to find some meat," Luffy grinned. Nami sighed, knowing his focus wouldn't shift. Zoro agreed about the meat and the booze, but his words were cut short by rustling in the bushes. "We've got company," he said darkly. Luffy chuckled as he knew what was going to happen. Nami hid behind the boat, and Zoro stood his ground. Then, laughter echoed from the hilltop. A skinny young man with a long nose, arms crossed, and a confident smile, stood overlooking them, surrounded by pirate flags bearing his Jolly Roger. Luffy couldn't suppress his grin. "I am Usopp, leader of this island and an invincible fleet of pirates. I am feared as Captain Usopp." Usopp bellowed. "You fools dare attack my island? My 80 million men will." Nami interrupted calmly, "That's a lie." Usopp's face paled. "Shit, I've been found out," he cried. "Okay, 80 million might be a slight exaggeration," he admitted, gesturing weakly at a few waving smiled, pointing. "You mean those 3? 3 terrified children scrambled from the bushes, dropping the flags and fleeing. Usopp screamed at them to stop. "Never seen a pirate who uses a slingshot," she commented as Luffy smirked. Usopp, aiming his slingshot, yelled, "I'm an expert." Luffy, in a low, serious tone, asked, "Now that you've drawn your weapon, will you use it?" Zoro subtly flicked his sword, the glint catching Usopp's eye. "The ones before you were real pirates," Zoro grinned menacingly. "Careful, or your next move will be your last." Usopp trembled, dropped his slingshot, and fell to his knees. "Just like I thought," he sighed. Real pirates' words carry weight, especially when backed up. Luffy and Zoro laughed. "I stole that," Luffy said, still laughing, "from Shanks, a pirate I know." "Wait, red-haired Shanks?" Usopp gasped. "Yeah, you're Usopp's kid, right?" Luffy asked. "Why, you know my dad," Usopp exclaimed, nearly falling off the cliff and scrambled back up, eyes wide. "You know my dad?" "Yeah," Luffy grinned. "But first, let's get some food." Usopp led the 3 of them to a restaurant so that they could eat. While they did, Luffy told Usopp how he met his father. Usopp listened as Luffy told him about how his father went on and on about his kid, which is how he knew who Usopp was. He then went on about how excellent Usopp's sniping was, how he never missed a shot, or how he said he could hit the antenna of an ant without hurting the rest. Usopp smiled as he listened to every word, glad to have heard something about his father after over a decade. "Hey, Usopp," Nami said. Once Luffy had resumed his enthusiastic eating. "We weren't exactly hoping to acquire a better ship, you know. Although we like a ship better than we have now, you wouldn't happen to know anyone who could help us with that, would you?" Usopp started to shake his head, a nervous tremor in his voice. "Sorry, but we don't have anyone who—" Before he could finish, Luffy interrupted, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Yeah," he said, pointing towards a grand mansion perched atop a nearby hill. "They have Mary." Zoro and Nami exchanged startled glances. They hadn't missed the fact that the man before them shared the same name Luffy had mentioned earlier. But given Luffy's casual manner and the way he'd spoken about knowing Usopp's father, they assumed the connection was through Usopp's stories. The way Luffy so easily dropped the name, Syrup Village, and seemed to know so much about Usopp, despite the boy's apparent lack of sailing experience, raised eyebrows, particularly Nami's. She gave Luffy a sharp, assessing look, her gaze lingering on him for a moment longer than strictly necessary. The implications of Luffy's seemingly effortless knowledge were far from clear. However, they decided not to question him. Luffy had mentioned he WOU when gathering the other 7 crew in his own time, so there was no point in pressing him for answers he wasn't going to give yet. "How do you know?" Usopp yelled, his face a mask of confusion. Luffy just grinned, a faraway look in his eyes for a fleeting moment, as if recalling a distant memory. "She's a beauty, perfect for our crew." Usopp said, "Don't go there, I got somewhere to be. Everyone here knows me, so eat all you want. It's on me," before hurrying out the door, leaving Nami and Zoro stunned, while Luffy burst into laughter. "What's wrong with him?" Zoro asked, staring at Luffy, who was still chuckling. Simultaneously, they heard, "The Usopp pirates are here!" A chorus of children's voices shrieked. The same ones who'd been with Usopp earlier. The trio turned as the children approached their table. "Where's our captain, you savages?" Pepper yelled, Carrot and Onion close behind, looking menacing. "Ah, that was some good meat," Luffy said, patting his distended belly. The kids stared at him in horror. "Meat?" Pepper and Onion stammered. "No way," Carrot whispered, aghast. Luffy grinned as Nami fought back giggles. Zoro leaned on the table, a dark smile playing on his lips. "Your captain," he said, his smirk widening, "was Eden." "Ah, which?" they screamed, pointing accusingly at Nami, who shrieked in protest at the accusation, as Luffy and Zoro roared with laughter. It's even funnier seeing it for the second time, Luffy thought, as Nami frantically tried to explain it was a joke. But USS said, one of them sputtered, prompting another round of laughter from Zoro and Luffy. After a brief conversation in the restaurant about the food and Usopp's whereabouts, they all headed towards the mansion where the children said Usopp would be. As they walked, the children began laughing along with Luffy. "You got us good," they said, still chuckling. During the walk, Nami asked why Usopp would be at the mansion. The children explained that Usopp was there to tell stories to Kaya, the mansion's owner, who had been ill for a year since her parents died. Despite her wealth, she was unhappy, and Usopp was trying to cheer her up. They enthusiastically shared their admiration for Usopp as they reached the mansion gates. "We're here," Onion announced. The gates locked, though. He trailed off, along with his friends, as they shrieked at the sight of Luffy stretching his arms. Zoro and Nami knew what was coming. They and the kids grabbed onto Luffy, only to be launched into the air with him. They soared through the sky, a mixture of screams and Luffy's excited laughter filling the air, before crashing down near a tree beside the house. Luffy laughed at their successful landing as he and Zoro walked away from the resulting crater, while Nami grumbled and rubbed her bruised backside. "My, are you alright?" a voice called from a window near the tree. They looked up to see Usopp peering from the tree and a slim and pale-skinned girl with pale blonde hair long to the shoulders. She has wide brown eyes that are of a sort of lighter shade. Kaya at the window. "Don't worry, we're okay," Luffy said with a grin. "Maybe you are," Nami yelled. "Why are you here?" Usopp asked, a slightly nervous tone in his voice as he tried to shield Kaya. "We're here to see you, miss," Luffy said. "Me? For what reason?" Kaya asked, her nervousness increasing as she observed Usopp's protective stance. "Well, we're hoping that—" "What is the meaning of all this?" A new voice turned to see Klahadore, or Kuro, striding towards them with a sour expression. "Klahadore," Kaya said weakly. Out with you all. You're trespassing, he declared, adjusting his glasses. Klahadore, these people are, not now, Miss Kaya. We'll talk after this rabble has left, he interrupted. Now all of you, leave the grounds unless you have business with me. We don't have business with you, Luffy said calmly, his hat low over his eyes. We're here to talk to the lady of the house about selling us a ship. She is ill and cannot deal with the likes of you miscreants, so a ship is out of the question, Kuro sneered, his gaze flicking upwards to spot Usopp trying to hide in the tree. Usopp. Crap. He saw me, Usopp muttered, looking down at the butler. What are you doing here? Trying to worm your way into Miss Kaya's good books to get at her fortune? Kuro said with a bored expression. Klahadore, Kaya cried out, while Usopp tried to soothe her. Of course you would. Only the son of a filthy pirate would make up a scheme like that, Kuro sneered. Usopp glared down at him. What did you just say about my father? Usopp roared, using a hook to swing down from the tree, his rage evident. Calm down, Usopp, Kuro said with a smug grin, adjusting his glasses. Why not just do what you do best and lie? Tell us how your father is a traveling salesman, or that you're adopted. Bastard, Usopp screamed, punching Kuro squarely in the face, sending him sprawling. Kaya and the children stared in shock, while Luffy simply observed the unfolding events. Kuro sat up, spitting out insults about Usopp's parentage. Shut up, Usopp yelled, declaring his pride in his father and refusing to be ashamed of his pirate heritage. Luffy smiled. Kuro only grinned and continued his insults. Usopp was about to punch him again when Kaya begged him to relent it as Kuro ordered them all off the property. Usopp stormed off, declaring he didn't. Children then unleashed their anger on Kuro for his insults. Luffy remained silent as they left after Kuro's repeated orders. Once outside the gates, Luffy ran off to where he remembered Usopp would go. He slowed down as Usopp came into view, sitting down beside him. I want to be left alone, Luffy, Usopp said, staring out at the sea. Hey, come on, Usopp. Don't let that bastard butler get to ya. We both know your dad is a great guy, Luffy said. Usopp smiled, expressing his admiration for his father and his desire to be like him. Luffy smiled before asking if he would see Kaya again. I don't know, Usopp sighed. That stupid butler doesn't want me anywhere near her. Why not ask politely? He's right there, Luffy said, pointing down the cliff. Usopp looked down and saw Kuro speaking to a strange man with heart-shaped. Overheard Kuro revealing himself as Captain Kuro of the Black Cat Pirates, explaining how 3 years prior, he'd planned to kill Kaya to steal her fortune after Django hypnotized her into signing a will leaving everything to him. And no way, Usopp whispered, his blood ran cold. Kaya, the woman he'd sworn to protect, was in mortal danger. He pictured his father, Usopp, standing proudly on the deck of Shanks' ship. A fierce determination hardened his gaze. He wouldn't run. He wouldn't hide. He would face Kuro, and he would protect Syrup Village. Maybe, just maybe, he could even prove himself worthy of the title, Captain Usopp. And perhaps, sailing with Luffy, a man who knew and respected his father, was the way to do it. Hey, Luffy said at the top of the cliff, getting both Kuro and Django's attention. Wah? Who are you? Django asked. You're that Straw Hat Kid from before, Kuro said as he adjusted his glasses. What are you doing here? Leave Kaya alone, Luffy said in a serious tone. Kuro just narrowed his eyes. So, you heard our conversation? Kuro asked, turning to Django. Django. Right, Django said, producing a ring and waving it at Luffy. Watch the rain, kid. When I count 1, 2, Django, you'll jump off the cliff. 1, 2, Jan. Suddenly, in a blur of motion, Luffy launched Usopp, a perfectly aimed projectile propelled by a burst of unbelievable speed and precision. Usopp, screaming a wordless shriek of pure terror and surprise, became a human missile. He didn't just land on Django. He collided with him with such force that Django was sent sprawling, unconscious, to the ground. Usopp landed in a heap beside him, winded but otherwise unharmed. Then, Usopp, catching his breath, yelled, "What the hell were you thinking?" His voice was slightly breathless. He stared, utterly speechless, at the bizarre tableau before him. Django, knocked out cold, and Usopp, miraculously unharmed, lying beside him. The hypnotic ring clattered to the ground, forgotten. Even Luffy seemed momentarily stunned by the unexpected effectiveness of his impromptu attack. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves against the rocks below. Then, a seagull landed on Usopp's head. Before Kuro could snap out of his shock, he heard a familiar, terrifying cry. Gum Gum Rocket. He barely dodged the colossal rubber fist that whizzed past his ear, the wind from its passage ruffling his hair. Seizing his chance, Usopp, already reloading his slingshot with impressive speed, fired a well-aimed shot that struck Kuro squarely in the face. Enraged, Kuro dashed towards Usopp, intent on silencing him permanently. Luffy finally freed himself from the ground where he'd landed after his failed attempt to tackle Kuro, seeing Kuro sprinting toward Usopp. He launched a rapid barrage of punches at Kuro, but the seasoned pirate dodged them all with effortless grace. Kuro's eyes narrowed, a predatory gleam in them. He moved with a speed that belied his butler facade, drawing a slender, wickedly sharp dagger from beneath his coat. The blade flashed, aimed directly at Luffy's heart. Time seemed to slow. Luffy, sensing the deadly intent behind the attack, twisted his body at the last possible moment. The dagger grazed his skin, leaving a thin red line. A fierce grin spread across Luffy's face. Gomu Gomu no Bullet, his fist, propelled by the force of his stretched rubber arm, slammed into Kuro's chest. The impact echoed across the cliffs. Kuro gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief, before crumpling to the ground, unconscious. After their confrontation with Kuro and Django on the secluded southern cliffs, Luffy and Usopp quickly tied up the unconscious bodies of the two villains using ropes from Usopp's bag. "There, that should hold them until we can get the authorities," Usopp said, double-checking the knots. Luffy nodded in satisfaction. "Great, now let's head back and regroup with the others. I'm sure Zoro and Nami are wondering what's taking us so long." The two made their way back down the cliffs, hurrying towards Kaya's mansion. As they approached, they could see the worried faces of Usopp's pirate crew, as well as Zoro and Nami, who had been waiting anxiously for their return. "Usopp, Luffy. There you are," Nami exclaimed. "What happened? We were starting to get worried." Usopp quickly explained everything that had transpired, Kuro's true identity, the planned attack on Syrup Village, and their confrontation on the cliffs. The Usopp pirates listened with growing horror, realizing the gravity of the situation. "So Kuro and Django are down, but the rest of the Black Cat pirates are still out there?" Zoro asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "That's right," Usopp confirmed. "We need to find a way to convince Kaya and stop the rest of the crew before they carry out their attack." Nami frowned, deep in thought. If Kuro and Django are out of commission, that buys us some time. But we need to act quickly before the other pirates realize something's wrong. Usopp turned to Kaya's mansion, his expression determined. "I have to try and make Kaya understand the truth. She has to believe me." Luffy placed a hand on Usopp's shoulder. "We're with you, Usopp. Let's go talk to Kaya and make sure she knows what's going on." Back at the mansion, they explained everything to a shocked and heartbroken Kaya, who finally accepted as the weight of Kuro's betrayal settled upon her. Onion burst into the room, his small face pale. "The pirates? Their ship? It's coming to the south shore." Without a word, Zoro stood, a grim smile playing on his lips. "You had your fun, Luffy. Now it's my turn." He started towards the door, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of Wado Ichimonji. "Wait," Onion cried, scrambling after him. "They're heading for the southern cliffs. I'll show you the fastest way." He tugged at Zoro's pant leg, urging him towards a side exit. Zoro followed Onion, a whirlwind of urgency leading him through the mansion's back gardens and down a narrow, overgrown salty tang of the sea grew stronger, the sounds of shouting echoing through the emerged onto the southern cliffs, overlooking a chaotic Black Cat pirates, emboldened by Kuro's absence, were rushing toward the village, to terrorize the villagers. A cruel grin spread across Zoro's face. Perfect, he drew his three swords. The polished steel gleaming in the afternoon a roar. He charged into the fray, a green blur of flashing pirates, initially confident, quickly realized they were hopelessly, swords danced. A whirlwind of precision and of surprise and pain filled the air as one after another. The pirates' fight was short, brutal, and entirely minutes, The remaining Black Cat pirates were either unconscious or fleeing back to their ship. Leaving behind a trail of scattered weapons, and groaning stood amidst the wreckage, sheathing his swords, his work done. The villagers, unaware of the battle that had saved them, awoke to a peaceful dawn. The villagers, blissfully unaware of the danger they had narrowly avoided, buzzed with activity. Inside the mansion, Luffy said, "Good work yesterday, Zoro." Zoro nodded his head in acknowledgement, before turning to Kaya about the ship. "So, about that ship," he began, a hopeful grin stretching across his face. "The Going Merry. We kinda need it." Kaya blinked, surprised. "The Going Merry," she repeated. Then, turning to Mary, the butler, who hovered nearby, she asked, "Did you tell them about her?" Mary, equally surprised, stammered, "And no, Miss Kaya, I haven't mentioned the ship or its name to anyone." He looked from Kaya to Luffy, a puzzled frown creasing his brow. Luffy, oblivious to the confusion, simply beamed. "She's a beauty. Perfect for our crew." He mimed sailing with his hands, nearly knocking over a vase of flowers. Kaya, seeing Luffy's earnest desperation and ingratitude for saving her and the village, softened. She glanced again at Mary. A silent conversation passing between them. A small smile touched her lips. "I suppose," she began, a hint of amusement in her voice, "a proper thank you is in order. And the Going Merry, well, she has been waiting for an adventure." At the north shore of the island, a rumbling sound echoed from the hillside. Suddenly, Usopp, his oversized backpack bulging at the seams, came tumbling down the slope, a human avalanche of bandages, slingshots, and dubious-looking concoctions. He yelled incoherently as he bounced and rolled, heading straight for the unsuspecting Luffy and Zoro. Luffy, mid-sentence about the merits of cannonballs versus meat, blinked as the chaotic mass approached. Zoro, leaning against a nearby tree, simply sighed. With perfect timing, they both extended their feet, planting them firmly in Usopp's path. The impact stopped the would-be pirate in his tracks, sending him sprawling face first into the grass with a muffled, "Oof." His backpack, seemingly possessing a life of its own, continued its forward momentum, bouncing over Usopp's head and landing with a thud a few feet away. A cloud of dust erupted from the impact, revealing a bizarre assortment of items scattered across the lawn. A rubber chicken, a bag of marbles, a small, wilting plant, and a suspiciously large magnifying glass. Usopp groaned, pushing himself up, his face covered in dirt and leaves. I meant to do that," he mumbled, brushing himself off with a theatrical flourish. He scrambled to his feet, attempting to regain some semblance of dignity, and fixed Luffy and Zoro with a determined, if slightly dusty, glare. "I am Usopp, captain of the Usopp Pirates, and I'm here to join your crew." With a sudden burst of energy, Luffy leapt onto the railing, his straw hat perched precariously on his head. He threw his arms wide, his infectious grin lighting up his face. "Set sail," he roared, his voice echoing across the water. The Going Merry, catching the weed forward, embarking on a grand adventure. Kaya stood at the edge of the pier, a small, wistful smile on her face as she watched the Going Merry pull away. Tears glistened in her eyes, but they were tears of joy and gratitude, not sadness. Usopp, standing at the ship's railing, waved back, his usual bravado replaced by quiet sincerity. "Take care, Kaya," he called out, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll come back and tell you all about my adventures." Kaya nodded, clutching the small, wrapped package he had given her. "I'll be waiting, Usopp," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain Usopp." A final wave and the gap between the ship and the shore widened. Usopp turned away, a new determination hardening his gaze as he looked out at the open sea. He had a crew, a captain to serve, and a world to explore. It had been some time since they left on their new ship. The warm afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Going Merry's deck as the crew went about their activities. Zoro dozed against the railing, his swords propped carefully beside him. At her desk, Nami studied her maps, occasionally glancing at the shifting clouds overhead. Near the bow, Usopp swung a pole around, acting out an imaginary battle against invisible foes. In the corner, Luffy hunched over something, his tongue sticking out in concentration. "Done," Luffy suddenly shouted, drawing everyone's attention. Zoro cracked open an eye. With what? Our mark. Luffy proudly held up his attempt at a Jolly Roger. The other three stared in horror at the bent and disfigured creation. This is our mark? They asked in unison as Luffy beamed. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? Luffy grinned. Shouldn't our mark strike fear into our enemies? Zoro asked dryly. Usopp sighed and stepped forward. Here, let the artist show you how it's done. He quickly painted a new symbol, but it looked suspiciously like himself. Just like I saw, Luffy thought, giving an annoyed look before he and Zoro simultaneously hit Usopp. Rejected, they declared. Usopp tried again, this time creating what would become their true mark, a skull and crossbones wearing a straw hat. That's very good, Nami approved. That's the one. Draw it on the sails too, Usopp, Luffy ordered, pointing upward. After completing the task, Usopp collapsed on the deck, exhausted. Luffy looked up at the sails with satisfaction. Now the pirate ship going merry has everything she needs. As if on cue, clouds began gathering overhead. Before anyone could comment on the weather, Luffy's expression turned serious. Everyone, there's something you need to know. We're heading to the Bharati restaurant first, but after that, we have an important mission. He glanced at Nami before continuing. Usopp, there's something you need to know. Nami's village is under the control of a fishman pirate named Arlong. We're going to help free her people. Usopp's hands trembled slightly. Fishman? Like the ones who are 10 times stronger than humans? Dark clouds gathered overhead as Luffy finished his explanation about Arlong. The sea grew choppy, making the going merry sway gently. Don't worry, Luffy grinned, stepping into an open space on the deck. I've gotten stronger too. Watch this. Steam began rising from his body as he called out, Gear second. His skin took on a pink hue, and the rising steam created an almost mystical effect against the darkening sky. Usopp stumbled backward, his jaw dropping. He's steaming, is he on fire? No, Zoro's eyes narrowed, his hand instinctively tightening on his sword hilt. This is different. The air around him. It feels heavier somehow. Nami gripped the railing, her knuckles white. Luffy, what did you do to yourself? Before anyone could blink, Luffy vanished from sight. A sudden gust of wind whipped past them, and he appeared behind Zoro, then above the mast, then by the figurehead. Moving so fast he left afterimages in his wake. Amazing. Usopp whispered, his eyes struggling to track their captain's movements. He's like a ghost. No, Zoro corrected, a slight smirk forming on his face. He's just that fast now. Nami's analytical mind was already working, but there must be some drawback. Nothing comes without a price. You're right, Luffy said, reappearing in front of them, still wreathed in steam. It uses a lot of energy. But wait until you see this next one, Gear third. The crew watched in stunned silence as their captain bit into his thumb and began to inflate his arm to massive proportions. Luffy's arm swelled to gigantic proportions, dwarfing the Going Merry's mast. Gear third, bone balloon. Ehhhhhh. Usopp shrieked, falling backward onto the deck. His arm is huge. How is that even possible? Nami's eyes widened in disbelief. He's blowing air into his bones? That's impossible. Gomu Gomu no. Luffy raised his massive fist toward the sky, the giant limb casting a shadow over the entire ship. Giant pistol. The force of Luffy's punch created a massive gust of wind that rocked the Going Merry. When he finished the demonstration, his body suddenly shrank down to a tiny, chibi version of himself. And this is the downside. His voice squeaked, causing Usopp to burst into laughter despite his earlier shock. You're tiny. Usopp wheezed between laughs, like a rubber doll. Zoro shook his head, though a small smile played at his lips. So each of these powers has a serious drawback. You've got to be careful with how you use them, Captain. The shrinking only lasts as long as I stay in Gear third, Luffy explained in his high-pitched voice, bouncing around the deck. But yeah, I had to time it right in fights. Nami rubbed her temples. Just when I think you can't surprise us anymore. You turn into a giant and then shrink into a child. What's next? Well, Luffy grinned mischievously, waiting for his body to return to normal. You're still working on controlling them better, aren't you? Zoro observed, arms crossed. Luffy nodded. Yeah, when I master it completely, I won't have any side effects with Gear third. The following day brought clear skies and steady winds, perfect training weather. The crew gathered on deck each morning, their determination varying with each passing day. While Luffy thinking if he should tell his crew about Hawkeye or not, it wasn't that big of a secret for him, but he wasn't sure if they could awaken it in just 4 months. Maybe Zoro if I pushed him hard enough, he thought, glancing at his first mate. His eyes then drifted to Nami and Usopp, but those two, he shook his head dismissively. Everyone, Luffy announced, standing before his assembled crew. Today we're going to try something new with the Hawkeye training. Whack! Ow! Luffy yelped as Nami's fist connected with his head. What was that for? I saw that look, Nami fumed, her fist still raised. You were thinking something rude about us, weren't you? No, I wasn't, Luffy protested, waving his hands defensively while sporting a fresh bump on his head. I was just thinking about, meat. Liar, Nami growled, raising her fist again. Zoro watched the scene with mild amusement, while Usopp took several cautious steps back from the angry navigator. You're as scary as ever, Nami, Luffy mumbled under his breath, only to receive another bump on his head. Hawkeye? Zoro asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, that's what it's called, Luffy said with a grin. Hawkeye is like a power that everyone has, but most people don't know how to use it. He furrowed his brow, trying to explain it clearly. There are 3 types. One lets you sense things and people's feelings, another lets you make your attacks stronger, and the last one. He paused, thinking of Shanks. Lets you knock people out with your willpower. The crew had varying reactions to this revelation. Zoro's eyes narrowed with interest, while Nami looked concerned, and Usopp started sweating nervously. How dangerous are these Hawkeye users exactly? Usopp stammered. Maybe I'm coming down with my can't go to the Grand Line disease. She, Luffy laughed. Don't worry too much, we'll get stronger as we go. That's how pirates work, besides, I believe in you guys. Luffy then explained each type in detail. Observation Hawkeye lets you sense things. Like where attacks are coming from, or where people or even if you can't see them. Armament Hawkeye is like invisible armor, makes your attacks stronger, and lets you hit Logia Devil Fruit users. And Conqueror's Hawkeye, the rarest one, can knock out people with weak willpower. So how do we start training? Zoro asked eagerly, his hand resting on his sword. Well, Luffy crossed his arms thoughtfully. The best way to awaken Hawkeye is through real battles. But there are some exercises we can do. For observation Hawkeye, we can start with blindfold training. Try to dodge attacks without seeing that, he continued. It's about focusing your will into a part of your body. Like making it hard as steel. Nami interjected, shouldn't we be careful about training? We're still in East Blue, and we don't want to attract too much attention. Don't worry, Luffy assured her. We can practice while we sail. Besides, the stronger we get now, the more ready we'll be for the Grand Line. Though awakening Hawkeye will take time. Maybe 4 to 6 months for me and Zoro, and you and Usopp. Well, we'll see. A week had passed since they began their Hawkeye training. The initial excitement had waned, replaced by varying degrees of frustration and, in some cases, resignation. Nami had already returned to focusing on her maps, muttering something about impossible abilities and waste of time. Usopp, after numerous failed attempts at sensing attacks while blindfolded, and several bumps on his head, had retreated to working on his inventions instead. Zoro, however, remained determined. During his training sessions, there were moments when he felt like he was on the verge of something, brief flashes of awareness that seemed promising. But they always slipped away before he could grasp them fully. These near misses only fueled his determination, leading to longer training sessions. But the most surprising development came from Luffy himself. During their practice sessions, he occasionally managed to dodge attacks without seeing them coming. At first, he thought it was just luck, but it kept happening. Hey, Zoro, Luffy called out excitedly after successfully avoiding another swing. I think I'm starting to get it. It's like I can feel where the attack is coming from. Zoro paused his training, wiping sweat from his brow. How are you progressing so fast? Maybe because of what happened before, Luffy mused, then quickly replayed. Maybe I'm just naturally good at it, she. From her spot, Nami observed the exchange with curiosity. You seem different when you train now, Luffy. More focused than usual. Really? Luffy scratched his head. I just remember what I mean, what I learned about hockey. It's like feeling the world around you, not just seeing it. Zoro's eyes narrowed slightly at Luffy's slip-up but said nothing. Instead, he resumed his stance. One more round, Captain? Sure. Luffy grinned, though internally he was relieved no one pressed him about his almost mention of Rayleigh. He needed to be more careful about revealing things he shouldn't know yet, it would ruin the fun after all. As they continued training, the Going Merry sailed steadily toward their next destination, the floating restaurant Barati, where Luffy knew another important member of their crew awaited them. The afternoon sun glinted off the waves as Luffy positioned himself by the ship's cannon. A distant rock formation caught his eye, and a knowing smile played across his face. He thought to himself, perfect. This is exactly where I saw it. Perfect target practice, he muttered, positioning the cannon. With a resounding boom, the cannonball soared through the air, missing the rock by several feet and creating a large splash in the water. The sound drew his crewmates' attention. Nami looked up from her maps. Zoro cracked open one eye from his nap against the mast, and Usopp poked his head out from below deck. What are you doing, Luffy? Nami called out, a hint of exasperation in her voice. Target practice. Luffy replied cheerfully, scratching his head as if confused by his miss. But I'm not very good at it. The rock formation stood silently in the distance, and Luffy could barely contain his excitement. He knew that behind that rock, a chance encounter awaited, one that would lead them closer to finding their future cook. Hey, Usopp, Luffy called out, still looking at the rock he'd just missed. Can you help me practice with the cannon? I'm not very good at it. Usopp perked up, glad to focus on something he was confident about rather than the frustrating hockey training. Leave it to me. I'm an expert marksman. You know, they used to call me Cannon Master Usopp back in my village. From his spot against the mast, Zoro observed the scene with half-lidded eyes. Though he appeared to be dozing, his mind was active, noting how their captain seemed to be orchestrating events with subtle purpose. It was becoming a familiar pattern, Luffy's apparent randomness that somehow always led them exactly where they needed to be. Really? Luffy asked with genuine excitement, though he knew Usopp was embellishing as usual. Watch and learn, Usopp declared, adjusting the cannon's position slightly. He took careful aim at the rock formation and fired. The cannonball flew true, striking the target dead center. See? That's how it's done. Wow, that was amazing. Luffy cheered, genuinely impressed despite knowing about Usopp's skills beforehand. However, their celebration was cut short by an angry voice shouting from the direction of the destroyed rock. Hey, what do you think you're doing? A small boat emerged from behind the remnants of the rock, and a man with sunglasses and a distinctive hairstyle was rowing furiously toward the Going Merry. Uh-oh, Usopp gulped. I think someone was using that rock as a landmark. Luffy's grin didn't fade, knowing exactly who was approaching. Don't worry, this might be interesting. The man reached their ship and climbed aboard, drawing his sword. I'll teach you to destroy my napping spot. Do you have any idea how many of my fellow bounty hunters you could have killed? Sorry about that, Luffy called out cheerfully. We were just doing some target practice. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm gonna be king of the pirates. Who are you? The man's expression shifted from anger to slight surprise at Luffy's direct introduction. Johnny, I'm a bounty hunter, and if you're pirates, he reached for his pocket, presumably for his bounty posters. The man's hand froze halfway to his pocket as a familiar voice called out from behind him. Johnny, what's going on up here? Everyone turned to see Zoro approaching, having finally decided to properly join the commotion. Johnny's eyes widened in recognition behind his sunglasses. Big bro Zoro, Johnny exclaimed, immediately dropping his aggressive stance. Is that really you? Been a while, Johnny, Zoro said with a slight smirk. Where's Yosaku? Johnny's expression suddenly turned grave. He's in our boat. He's sick, big bro. He was fine a few days ago, but then his old wounds opened up and his teeth started falling out. I don't know what to do. Nami, who had been watching the exchange with interest, suddenly stepped forward. Let me see him. It sounds like scurvy. Scurvy? Johnny looked confused. It's a simple fix, Nami explained, already heading toward the side of the ship. We just need to get him some citrus fruits. Luffy, Usopp, help me get him aboard. Luffy's rubber arms extended across the water, carefully lifting the sickly Yosaku onto the Going Merry's deck. Within moments, Nami had them treating him, practically force-feeding him limes while Yosaku weakly protested. Suddenly, color returned to Yosaku's pale face. He sprang to his feet with unexpected vigor, joining Johnny in an impromptu celebration dance. "I'm cured," Yosaku proclaimed, spinning joyfully. "He's cured," Johnny echoed, matching his partner's movements. "Hooray!" they shouted in unison. Nami's fist came down on both their heads. "You don't recover that fast, you idiots." The bounty hunters composed themselves, straightening their clothes with exaggerated dignity. "Allow us to properly introduce ourselves," Johnny began with a formal bow. "I'm Johnny. And I'm Yosaku." They struck a synchronized pose. "We're bounty hunters. Big bro Zoro used to hunt with us," Johnny added, grinning at their old companion. Zoro smirked from his position against the mast. "Never thought I'd run into you two again. Especially as a pirate," Yosaku finished, moving to clasp Zoro's hand. The moment was cut short as his face collapsed mid-handshake. "Partner," Johnny's panicked cry rang out across the deck. After settling Yosaku in to rest properly this time, the crew gathered in the lounge. The incident had sobered their mood considerably. "Let this be a lesson," Nami said, making careful notes in the logbook. "The sea isn't forgiving of poor preparation." Zoro nodded sagely. "You need to be ready for anything out here. That's exactly why we're heading to the floating Resta Urant bar. Ati," Luffy declared through a mouthful of bread. He turned to Nami, eyes bright with anticipation. "Did you figure out where it is?" "Yeah," Nami replied, looking up from her maps. "According to my calculations, we should reach the Barati in a couple of days, assuming the weather holds up." "A floating restaurant?" Johnny perked up from where he sat. "You mean the Barati? That place is famous. They say the food there is incredible, but the cooks are all tough former pirates." Luffy grinned widely at this, knowing exactly how tough one cook in particular was. "That's perfect. We need a cook for our crew anyway." "A cook would be good," Usopp agreed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "We can't keep living on bread and whatever we can catch from the sea. Plus, someone needs to make sure you don't eat all our provisions in one sitting, Luffy," Nami added with a pointed look at their captain. Zoro observed Luffy's excited expression with interest. There it was again. That look that suggested their captain knew more than he was letting on. But as usual, he kept his observations to himself. "Well, if you're all heading to the Barati," Johnny said, straightening up with pride, "Yosaku and I can show you the way. We've passed by there plenty of times during our hunting." He paused, turning to Zoro with a knowing look. "Oh right, big bro. We heard some interesting rumors. That Hawkeye guy you've been searching for? Word is he's been spotted around those waters." Zoro's hand instinctively moved to his white katana, his expression sharpening with interest. The mere mention of Hawkeye made his blood stir with anticipation. "Great!" Luffy exclaimed, his trademark grin spreading across his face. He could barely contain his excitement, knowing full well what awaited them at the restaurant. "Then it's settled. To the Barati we go." The morning sun glinted off the waves as an unusual sight came into view. A massive fish-shaped structure floating on the sea. The Going Merry approached the famous floating restaurant Barati, its distinctive design drawing excited gasps from the crew. "There it is," Luffy shouted from his favorite spot on Merry's figurehead, barely containing his enthusiasm. Nami consulted her maps one final time. The rumors were true. It is built like a giant fish. Zoro stood at the railing, his eyes scanning the surrounding waters, perhaps hoping for a glimpse of the legendary swordsman said to frequent these parts. As they drew closer, another ship caught their attention, a marine vessel approaching from the opposite direction. Its pristine white sails stood in stark contrast to the Mary's newly painted Jolly Roger. "Marines," Usopp gulped, his knees already beginning to shake. "Maybe we should turn back?" Luffy's grin only widened. "Nah, this is going to be fun." The marine ship pulled alongside the Barati, and a figure emerged onto its deck. Lieutenant Iron Fist, full body, resplendent in his crisp uniform, stood with his date, a beautiful woman in a red dress. Well, full body sneered, spotting the Mary's pirate flag. "What do we have here?" The Marine lieutenant's eyes narrowed as he studied the small pirate crew. A pathetic bunch of pirates daring to sail under that flag. How amusing. His date giggled at his side, clearly impressed by his bravado. Johnny and Yosaku, recognizing the lieutenant, stepped forward eagerly. "Hey, that's Iron Fist Full Body," Johnny declared, pulling out their collection of bounty posters, known for his. "Oh," Full Body interrupted, his lip curling in disgust. "Those worthless bounty hunters are still hanging around these waters? How sad." Full Body's casual dismissal hit its mark. Johnny and Yosaku bristled with anger, but before they could react, Luffy stepped forward, his trademark grin still in place. "Hey, we're here to eat, not fight," Luffy called out cheerfully, though there was a knowing glint in his eye. "Unless you want to start something?" Full Body scoffed, turning away. "I don't have time to waste on small-time pirates. Come, my dear. Let's enjoy our lunch." He led his date toward the Baraties' entrance, deliberately ignoring the crew. As the Marine couple made their way into the restaurant, Luffy's grin widened. He knew who was coming next. The crew followed shortly after, entering the floating restaurant. The interior of the Baratie was impressive, with elegant tables covered in white cloths, waiters in formal attire moving efficiently between customers, and the tantalizing aroma of gourmet dishes filling the air. "Wow!" Usopp exclaimed, his eyes wide. "This place is fancy." Just then, a commotion erupted from across the dining room. Full Body stood up, his face red with anger, while a tall, blonde waiter in a black suit stood calmly before him. "What did you say about this wine?" Full Body demanded. The waiter took a long drag from his cigarette before responding. "I said you don't know shit about wine, you second-rate Marine." The tension in the dining room was palpable as Full Body's face turned an even deeper shade of red. His date looked mortified, shrinking in her seat. "How dare you?" Full Body shouted. "Do you know who I am? I'm Lieutenant Iron Fist Full Body." The blonde waiter Sanji exhaled a cloud of smoke, his visible eye regarding the Marine with clear disdain. "I don't care if you're a Marine or a king. In this restaurant, you don't waste food." Luffy and his crew watched with growing interest as Full Body glanced down at his soup, which he had earlier complained about and demanded to be replaced. "This soup is terrible," Full Body declared, sweeping his arm across the table and knocking the bowl to the floor. The crash of breaking porcelain echoed through the now silent restaurant. In an instant, Sanji's demeanor changed. His casual stance disappeared, replaced by cold fury. Before anyone could blink, his leg shot out in a devastating kick that sent Full Body flying across the room, crashing into several empty tables. "Food is sacred," Sanji said quietly, straightening his tie. "The sea can be cruel, and meals aren't guaranteed. Every dish that leaves our kitchen contains the chef's heart and soul." The Marine struggled to his feet, blood trickling from his nose. You struck a Marine officer, I'll have this place shut down." Just then, a wooden peg leg could be heard thumping across the floor. "What's all this racket in my restaurant?" a gruff voice demanded. The owner of the voice emerged, a man with an impressively long mustache and a chef's hat. His wooden leg and fierce expression marked him as the infamous Red Leg, Zeph, owner of the Baratie. "What's going on here, Eggplant?" Zeph demanded, looking between Sanji and the disheveled Marine. "Nothing, shitty old man," Sanji replied, lighting another cigarette. "Just teaching some manners to a customer who doesn't respect food." Full Body, seeing his chance, pointed accusingly at Sanji. "This violent waiter attacked me, I demand." "Shut up," Zeph cut him off bluntly. "If Sanji kicked you, you probably deserved it." His eyes narrowed. "Though that doesn't excuse fighting in my restaurant, you stupid eggplant." With surprising speed for a man with a wooden leg, Zeph delivered a swift kick to Sanji's head. Meanwhile, Luffy watched the entire scene with stars in his eyes. "That was so cool," he exclaimed, turning to his crew. "I've decided, he's going to be our cook." "You can't just decide that," Nami protested, but she could tell from Luffy's expression that his mind was made up. Suddenly, the restaurant's doors burst open. A bloody Marine soldier stumbled in, panic evident on his face. "Lieutenant Full Body, emergency. The prisoner. He escaped from the ship. Don Krieg's man. He killed 7 of our men." Full Body, his face in disbelief. "Impossible," 3 days. When we captured him he was close to starving. We haven't given him a single crumb of food since then." The restaurant fell deathly silent. The mere mention of Don Krieg's name sent chills through the dining room. Customers exchanged fearful glances, some quietly pushing their chairs back from their tables. Everyone in the East Blue knew that name, Don Krieg, commander of a fleet of 50 pirate ships, the most feared pirate in these waters. A mother pulled her child closer. A businessman's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, as everyone wondered, what kind of monster could kill 7 trained Marines while starving to death? Just then, a gaunt, starving man walked into the restaurant, his presence commanding immediate attention despite his weakened state. "This is a restaurant, right?" he asked, slumping into an empty chair. "Bring me food. I don't care what it is." "Welcome, you bastard." Patty, one of the Barati's cooks, approached the newcomer with an exaggerated bow. "Will you be able to pay for your meal?" The starving man raised his head slowly, revealing sunken eyes. "Would a bullet be acceptable? That's all I can offer." "So you can't pay?" Patty's fake smile vanished. "Then you're no customer." Without warning, he grabbed the man and threw him out of the restaurant through the back door. Luffy watched from the window as the man collapsed outside, his stomach growling audibly. Sanji, who had been cooking silently in the kitchen, emerged carrying a plate of steaming rice and a glass of water. He walked outside, placing the food in front of the starving man. "Eat," Sanji said simply, sitting down and lighting another cigarette. The man's eyes widened. "Shut up. I don't take charity from others even if I'm down." While looking away from the food, "Take this food away." "Stop whining and eat already," Sanji replied, staring out at the sea. "Going hungry is the worst way to die. A cook feeds the hungry, that's all there is to it." The man began to eat, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. I really is the best meal I've ever had. Thank you." From his vantage point, Luffy's grin grew even wider. "Now I really want him as our cook." Inside the restaurant, Zeph watched the scene with a knowing look, his arms crossed over his chest. The back door of the Barati creaked open as Luffy stepped outside, his eyes immediately falling on Jin, who was still eating. With his characteristic grin, Luffy approached them. "Hey, you. Lucky that he gave you food." Luffy laughed, pointing at Sanji. "You're pretty much dead back there." Without missing a beat, he turned to Sanji with an eager expression. "Hey, join my crew as our cook." "No thanks," Sanji replied immediately, not even looking up. "I refuse," Luffy declared, still grinning from ear to ear. "That's not how it works," Sanji snapped, irritation clear in his voice. Their back and forth was interrupted by Jin, who had just finished scraping his plate clean. "Sorry to interrupt," he started cautiously. "What?" Both Luffy and Sanji turned to him, shouting in unison. "I'm Jin, from the Krieg Pirates," he introduced himself, then looked at Luffy with curiosity. "You're pirates too, right? What's your goal?" Luffy puffed out his chest proudly, his smile never wavering. "I'm going to the Grand Line, to become the king of the pirates." Jin looked at Luffy appraising Ly, noting his small crew. "You seem to have few members since you're looking for a cook." "Yep. He'll be our 5th member," Luffy declared cheerfully, pointing at Sanji, already knowing that the stubborn cook would eventually join his crew. "Don't count me in already," Sanji snapped back, exasperated. Jin's expression grew serious. "Since you seem like a nice kid, let me give you some advice. Stay away from the Grand Line. There are plenty of other places you can go to." Luffy's smile took on a knowing edge. "I know the Grand Line is dangerous," he said, thinking of all the adventures and battles that awaited them. "But One Piece is there, so that's where I'm going. Besides, I have a really strong crew." He grinned, already picturing his future nakama. "You sound like you've been there," Luffy added, though he already knew about Jin's experiences. Jin grew quiet, his body trembling as he stared at the ground. Once, he muttered, "That place makes no sense. It was nothing but one horror after another there." "Is that so?" Sanji remarked, while Luffy just kept smiling, knowing that what Jin had seen was just the beginning of what the Grand Line had to offer. "Man, this food is incredible," Usopp exclaimed, savoring every bite while dining with Zoro and Nami. Johnny and Yosaku had stayed behind on the Going Merry to avoid drawing attention to their pirate connections. I really hope we can get a chef from here to join us. Yeah, that would be great, Nami replied softly. Her subdued tone caught both men's attention as she rose from the table. Where are you going? Zoro asked, eyeing her suspiciously. Just getting some air, she responded without turning back, making her way through the doors. She walked to the back of the restaurant and leaned against the railing, letting out a heavy sigh as thoughts of her village filled her mind. A small smile crossed her face as she remembered Luffy's promise to defeat Arlong and free her people. The sincerity in his offer had touched her deeply. The sound of unfurling sails caught her attention. Looking to her left, she saw Jin bowing deeply to Sanji before his small boat began drifting away. Sanji, Zeph's voice boomed. Get back to work. The old chef disappeared back into the restaurant. Shitty old geezer, Sanji muttered under his breath. As they headed toward the entrance, Luffy sensed a familiar presence and glanced left to find Nami watching them. Oh, hey Nami, Luffy called out cheerfully. Who? Sanji asked, pausing at the doorway. His eyes landed on Nami, and in an instant, his demeanor changed completely. Nami. She's my navigator and friend and… Where'd you go? Luffy blinked as Sanji suddenly materialized before Nami, presenting a rose with a flourish. It must be fate that we meet like this, mademoiselle, Sanji swooned. Oh, hello. Nami replied quietly before turning to Luffy, friend of yours? He's our new cook, Luffy announced with his trademark grin. I'm not your cook, Sanji protested before realization struck. Wait, you mean she's part of your crew? Yep, Luffy confirmed. Sanji closed his eyes dramatically. Fate is indeed a cruel mistress. To be so close, yet so far. What's he talking about, Luffy? Nami asked, puzzled. He doesn't want to leave the restaurant, but I already refused his refusal, Luffy explained simply. Sanji. Zeph's voice thundered from inside again, snapping Sanji back to reality. I don't think he'll leave, Luffy, Nami said doubtfully. Luffy just grinned, already knowing the outcome. He will because we're not leaving until he comes with us. It was a while after Jin left and Luffy hadn't given up. He would ask Sanji to join and Sanji would refuse. Nami's mood brightened a bit watching Luffy annoy Sanji. Sanji was giving free meals to Nami after she charmed them out of him, which caused the other chefs to yell at him. Zeph and Sanji even got into a fight after Sanji refused to listen to Zeph, who told him to get out of his restaurant. Sanji told him that he wouldn't leave no matter what. A few days later, a massive galleon appeared on the horizon, its approach sending waves of tension through the Bharati. The ship was in terrible condition, with torn sails, splintered wood, and barely staying afloat. That's Don Krieg's ship, one of the cooks shouted in disbelief. The restaurant's customers fled in panic as two figures entered Jin supporting a larger man who looked on the verge of collapse. It was Don Krieg himself, his once proud armor dull and his face gaunt with hunger. Please, Krieg fell to his knees. Food, water, money, I'll pay anything. Don Krieg, Jin pleaded to the restaurant staff. He hasn't eaten in days, he'll die. Patty and the other cooks laughed. Sir Don Krieg? The most notorious pirate in the East Blue? He'll kill us all once he regains his strength. But Sanji was already walking toward the kitchen. Sanji, don't, several cooks warned. Minutes later, he returned with a huge plate of food, setting it before Krieg. Eat. Sanji, you idiot, Patty yelled. Don't you know who he is? As soon as Krieg finished eating, his demeanor changed completely. He stood up, towering over everyone, a cruel smile spreading across his face. This is a nice restaurant, he announced. I think I'll take it. You bastard! Patty shouted as several cooks drew weapons. This is why we shouldn't have fed you. Krieg backhanded the nearest cook, sending him flying. My crew is starving. Bring food for 100 men. Then this ship will be mine. I'll prepare it, Sanji said calmly, turning toward the kitchen. Are you crazy? The other cooks tried to stop him. They're hungry. That's all I need to know. Before Sanji could move, Zeph appeared, dropping a huge sack of food in front of Krieg. Owner Zeph. The cooks gasped. Krieg's eyes widened in recognition. Red-legged Zeph. So you're alive. The famous pirate who was both captain and cook. The man who never used his hands in battle. His smile grew more sinister. This is perfect. Not only will I take this ship, but I'll also have your logbook from the Grand Line. So that's your aim, Zeph said stoically. Wait, you're a pirate? Luffy asked excitedly. The Grand Line. Krieg's expression darkened. My fleet of 50 ships was destroyed in just 7 days there. With Zeph's knowledge, I can return and conquer it. You'll never make it, Luffy declared. I'm going to be the one who conquers the Grand Line and becomes king of the pirates. Krieg burst out laughing. This brat, I'll kill you first. Just try it, Luffy cracked his knuckles, grinning. I won't let you take this restaurant. Krieg sneered and headed back to his ship to feed his crew. As his men inked, tension filled the air at the Bharati. All of you should leave, Zeph told the remaining customers, who quickly fled. Jin looked devastated. Sanji-san, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't know he would. Don't apologize for feeding someone hungry, Sanji said firmly, lighting his cigarette with practiced ease. That's what a cook does. The conviction in his voice left no room for argument. Luffy turned to Zeph, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Hey old man, if I get rid of these guys, what will you give me? Zeph regarded him with his usual stoic expression. Do what you want, he replied gruffly. The conversation was suddenly interrupted by an ear-splitting sound, the horrific screech of metal and wood being torn apart. All eyes turned to Krieg's massive galleon as it split down the middle, cleaving as cleanly as if cut by a giant knife. The once proud ship was being divided into perfect halves. Panic erupted among Krieg's men. They scrambled desperately across the deck of their dying vessel, their terrified screams carrying across the water. What's happening? One of the pirates shrieked in horror, voicing the question on everyone's mind as they watched the impossible scene unfold before them. The destruction was precise, methodical, and terrifying in its efficiency. Something, or someone, was out there, and they had just turned one of the most feared ships in the East Blue into driftwood. Through the settling debris and chaos, a small boat emerged, carrying a solitary figure. His yellow eyes, sharp as a hawk's, cut through the mist, and an enormous black sword was strapped to his back. His presence alone was enough to make the air feel heavy. That's, one of Krieg's men screamed in recognition, his voice trembling with terror. The man who destroys our fleet. Pure panic erupted among Krieg's crew. Men were diving into the water, desperately trying to escape, while others froze in fear. On the Bharati, Zoro's entire demeanor changed. His body went rigid, and his hand instinctively moved to his swords. His eyes blazed with an intensity that had been waiting for this very moment. Hawkeye Mahawk, Zoro said, gripping his swords tightly, his voice carrying years of anticipation. I've been looking for you. Meanwhile, Mahawk appeared completely indifferent to the chaos he'd caused. The greatest swordsman in the world had merely followed these pirates from the Grand Line because he was bored, nothing more. He watched with disinterest as the remnants of Krieg's once mighty galleon slipped beneath the waves, the screams of desperate pirates filling the air. Why did you attack our ship? One of Krieg's men demanded. To kill time, Mahawk replied coldly. Zoro stepped forward, tying his black bandana around his head. His eyes locked onto Mahawk with unwavering determination. I challenge you to a duel, Zoro declared, his voice firm and resolute. Mahawk studied him with his hawk-like eyes. You're a brave young man, he observed coolly, or a foolish one. What drives you? My ambition, Zoro replied, gripping his swords. To become the world's greatest swordsman. A flicker of interest crossed Mahawk's face as he reached for the small cross pendant around his neck. To everyone's surprise, it was a tiny dagger, no longer than a few inches. This should suffice, Mahawk stated. Don't mock me, Zoro growled, his pride stinging at the sight of the miniature weapon. I'm not. I'm afraid I don't carry any smaller blades, Mahawk replied calmly. It would be a shame for a lion to hunt a rabbit. Zoro placed Wado Ichimonji in his mouth and drew his other two swords. Free sword style, he announced, charging forward with all his might. But Mahawk simply stood there, the tiny dagger held almost casually in his hand. When Zoro's three blades came crashing down, they were stopped by that single small dagger. Zoro's eyes widened in disbelief, he couldn't move his swords an inch. Such ferocity, Mahawk's golden eyes studied him with growing interest. What drives you to push against an impossible wall? Between labored breaths, Zoro's voice carried the weight of his conviction. A promise that I swore on my soul. Tiger hunt, Zoro roared, launching himself forward in a desperate assault. The small dagger found its mark, piercing Zoro's chest. Blood trickled down, staining his white shirt crimson. Yet Zoro didn't move, his sword still raised, his stance unwavering. "Why don't you step back?" Mihawk asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Are you willing to let me pierce your heart?" Zoro's response came through blood-stained teeth, but his eyes burned with unshakable resolve. "I don't know why, but taking even one step back now would destroy everything I am. All my promises, my dreams. They'd shatter, and I'd never find my way back to this moment." "That, young warrior, is defeat," Mihawk stated plainly. "Then defeat is not an option," Zoro growled. "Even if death awaits?" Death before defeat. Something changed in Mihawk's expression. Respect, perhaps even admiration. He withdrew his dagger, and for the first time, a smile tugged at his lips. What an extraordinary spirit. He chooses death over defeat. Now that's truly rare. The world seemed to hold its breath as Mihawk reached for Yuru, the massive black blade on his back. The sword that had carved legends into history itself. "Tell me your name, young swordsman." Standing tall despite his wound, he answered, "Roronoa Zoro." Roronoa Zoro. I'll remember that name. Mihawk raised Yuru, its black surface drinking in the sunlight. It's been long since I've met someone with such iron in their soul. I shall honor your resolve by ending this with the world's strongest blade. I appreciate it, Zoro replied, crossing his swords for one final stand. In the watching crowd, Luffy's fingers dug into the wooden railing of the Barati, his knuckles turning white. His heart raced watching his swordsman face certain defeat, yet a strange calmness underlined his anxiety. He'd seen this before, the moment that would forge Zoro into something greater. This has to happen, Luffy thought, fighting every instinct to jump in and protect his nakama. His rubber fingers cracked the wood beneath them as Mihawk raised his black blade. Zoro needs this. He'll survive. He has to survive. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corner of Luffy's mouth, even as worry clouded his eyes. This wasn't just a duel. It was the first step on Zoro's path to becoming the world's greatest swordsman. Sometimes a captain's duty wasn't to prevent his crew's pain, but to let them grow through it. 3 sword-style secret technique. 3,000 worlds. Zoro began spinning his swords. Fall, Mihawk said simply, bringing down his black blade. In an instant, 2 of Zoro's swords shattered, and blood erupted from his chest. Zoro knew he was defeated, but instead of falling, he sheathed his remaining sword, Wado Ichimonji, and turned to face Mihawk, arms spread wide. "What are you doing?" Mihawk asked. "A wound on the back is a swordsman's shame," Zoro replied with a smile. "Splendid," Mihawk exclaimed, and with one final slash, he cut Zoro diagonally across his chest. "Zoro, Zoro," Luffy's voice cracked, his fingers splintering the wooden railing. Behind him, Usopp had gone pale, while Nami covered her mouth in horror. Even Sanji, who barely knew them, found himself holding his breath as the swordsman fell. And for just a brief moment, a slight pulse of invisible force rippled through the air. Though barely noticeable to most, Mihawk's keen eyes caught it, making him glance briefly at the straw-hatted boy with subtle interest. "Don't you dare die." As Zoro fell backward into the sea, Johnny and Yosaku quickly dove in to rescue him. When they pulled him onto their boat, everyone feared the worst. Mihawk, who had felt the conquer haki from early, turned to Luffy. "Kid, what's your goal?" "To become the king of the pirates," Luffy declared without hesitation. Mihawk's eyes narrowing the pulse of haki he'd felt moments ago. "That's even harder than surpassing me," he remarked, then added with more interest than before, though perhaps not as impossible as others might think. "You possess something rare." Then, turning back to the injured Zoro, he proclaimed, "It's still too early for you to die. My name is Dracule Mihawk." He turned his voice higher. "Learn about yourself. Learn about the world. And become strong. No matter how many years it takes, I'll hold this seat of the strongest and wait for you. Try to suppress me. Roronoa Zoro." Meanwhile, Johnny and Yosaku were frantically trying to treat Zoro's wounds. Hey, Zoro Aniki. Please say something." Brother, stay with us. It's still too early for you to die, they cried in unison. But then, to their amazement, Zoro raised his remaining sword to the sky. Luffy, he called out, his voice choked with tears and blood. Can you hear me? Yeah, Luffy responded. I'm sorry for worrying you. If I don't become the world's strongest swordsman, it would be a problem for you, right, King of the Pirates? Zoro coughed. I will never lose again. Until I defeat him and become the world's greatest swordsman, I will never lose again. Any problems with that, King of the Pirates? Luffy's face broke into his signature wide grin. Nope, he shouted back. Mihawk smiled at the exchange, seemingly satisfied. Then, turned his attention back to Don Krieg and his crew, and said, I've had enough fun for today. I'm going back. Hold it right there, Krieg shouted. You may have had enough, but I haven't even gotten started. You're a fool who hasn't learned his lesson, Mihawk said coldly as Krieg prepared his weapons. Krieg fired multiple guns hidden in his armor, but Mihawk simply slashed his black blade through the air, creating a massive wave that not only deflected the bullets but also split the already damaged galleon further. The pirates scrambled as their footing crumbled beneath them. Farewell, Mihawk said simply, but before departing, he cast one final glance at Luffy, thinking to himself, first that straw hat of Shanks's, and now this. This boy bears watching, and disappeared into the distance on his small boat, leaving chaos in his wake. With their ship destroyed, Krieg's pirates were now scattered in the water, clinging to debris. Don Krieg, however, saw this as an opportunity rather than a setback. Men, he bellowed. We now have a perfect target, the Bharati. This restaurant will become our new flagship. Meanwhile, on the Bharati, Sanji stood watching the scene unfold, cigarette in mouth. Those bastards just don't know when to quit, he muttered. Luffy, still determined to protect the restaurant that Sanji treasured, cracked his knuckles. Sanji, old man, leave this to me. Gum gum rocket. Luffy launched himself toward the floating debris where Krieg and his men were gathering. That kid's insane, one of Krieg's pirates shouted as Luffy landed among them. Don Krieg sneered, his golden armor gleaming in the sunlight. So, you want to fight me, boy? Do you know who I am? I'm Don Krieg, with a bounty of 17 million berries. I don't care who you are, Luffy replied, adjusting his straw hat. You're threatening an old man's restaurant, and I won't let you do that. Meanwhile, back on the Bharati, the salt spray carried the sounds of battle back to the Bharati, where steam rose from the kitchen windows and the scent of fresh bread mixed with gunpowder. Inside, the cooks. Sanji stood at the front, watching Luffy with interest. That rubber idiot better not wreck this restaurant, Zeph commented from behind them, arms crossed. Krieg pulled out his massive spear, pointing it at Luffy. This is my mighty battle spear. One hit from this, and you're dead. We'll see about that. Luffy grinned, already knowing from his future fragments that this weapon wouldn't be nearly as dangerous as others he'd face. MH5, Krieg shouted, launching a poison gas bomb. Everyone, hold your breath, someone yelled from the Bharati. Luffy quickly jumped high, remembering similar poison attacks he'd seen in his visions. That's playing dirty, he shouted, though he was grateful knowing what to expect. There's no such thing as dirty in a real fight. Krieg laughed, firing spikes from his shoulder pads. Only winners and losers. Luffy twisted his body to dodge the spikes, remembering how his future self would handle much faster projectiles. These are nothing compared to what's coming, he thought with a grin. Gum gum pistol. His fist shot forward, but Krieg blocked it with his golden armor. Fool! My Woot's steel armor is the strongest in the East Blue, Krieg boasted. Luffy smirked, recalling visions of himself breaking much tougher defenses. Then I'll just have to hit it harder. He landed on a piece of floating debris, already knowing where its weak points would be. Bomb spear. Krieg thrust his weapon forward, causing a massive explosion. Thanks to his future knowledge, Luffy had already started moving before the explosion, his clothes only slightly singed. That was close, he grinned, though he knew he'd faced far worse. Stop dodging and die, Krieg roared, detaching sections of his armor to use as a makeshift shield wall. I am the strongest, I have the most powerful weapons. Being strong isn't just about weapons, Luffy shouted back, winding up his arm. Gum gum, Gatling. A barrage of punches hammered against Krieg's shields, the impact sending shockwaves across the water. Several of Krieg's remaining men watched in awe as their captain was forced to step back. Impossible! Krieg snarled, his armor starting to show cracks. I am Don Krieg. I command 5,000 men. I cannot lose to a nobody like you. You hurt Sanji's restaurant, Luffy said simply, stretching both arms far behind him. That's all I need to know, Gum Gum. Bazooka. Luffy's Gum Gum bazooka slammed into Krieg's armor with tremendous force. The golden woot's steel, supposedly the strongest in East Blue, began to crack and splinter. No, impossible! Krieg screamed as his prized armor shattered. The impact sent him flying backward, but he managed to catch himself on a piece of wreckage. It's over, Krieg, Luffy declared. Never. Krieg pulled out his final weapon, a massive spiked ball attached to a chain. I'll destroy you and this entire restaurant. He swung the weapon wildly, forcing Luffy to dodge repeatedly. The massive ball crashed into the water, sending huge waves that rocked the Bharati. Watch it, you idiots, Sanji yelled from the restaurant. You'll sink us all. Luffy watched Krieg's movements, comparing them to the countless stronger opponents he'd seen in his visions. Everything seemed to move slower, more predictable. This ends now, he declared, grabbing the chain. While he couldn't yet use the advanced techniques he'd seen, just knowing they existed made him fight smarter. What? Krieg's eyes widened. Then he stretched his leg high into the air. Gum Gum. Axe. His Gum Gum axe might not have Hawkeye yet, but it was more than enough for someone like Krieg. As his opponent fell unconscious, Luffy couldn't help but think, beating guys like Krieg is how I get stronger. Each fight teaches me something new. He grinned, recalling glimpses of himself using advanced techniques that seemed impossible now. I can't use Hawkeye or Gear 4th yet. But someday I will. Every battle, even this one, is a step toward becoming the Pirate King. Don Krieg. His remaining crew members cried out in shock. Jin, who had been watching the entire fight, stared in disbelief as his captain's unconscious body floated to the surface. He did it. He defeated Don Krieg. That rubber idiot did it, Sanji muttered, lighting a cigarette while watching Krieg's unconscious body being fished out by his remaining crew. Despite his casual tone, there was a hint of respect in his eyes. He didn't even need to use those gear things, Zoro commented with a smirk, watching Krieg sink into the sea. Nami nodded. Red demonstrated gear 2nd and 3rd. He's holding back. Even without those techniques, he's still this strong. That was awesome, Luffy bro. Johnny and Yosaku cheered. Sanji looked confused at the mentions of gear and Hawkeye, but before he could ask, Luffy bounced over. She. See? I told you guys I'd be fine. This is nothing compared to what we'll face in the Grand Line. Luffy grinned at his crew. Zeph raised an eyebrow, having overheard their conversation. Something about this rookie pirate was definitely unusual. Hey Luffy, Usopp called out, did you use observation Hawkeye? I tried but I couldn't focus. Luffy shakes his head disappointedly. From the Bharati, the cooks erupted in cheers. Sanji stood silently, cigarette in his mouth, a slight smile forming on his face. Owner Zeph, one of the cooks, turned to the head chef. That kid, he actually saved the restaurant. Zeph crossed his arms, watching Luffy with interest. That boy, he's something else. Get Don Krieg out of the water, Jin ordered the remaining crew members, who quickly moved to rescue their unconscious captain. Luffy made his way back to the Bharati, his rubber body exhausted from the intense battle. Sanji met him at the entrance. Not bad for a rubber idiot, Sanji said, offering Luffy a hand up. Thanks. Hey, now that that's over, join my crew, Luffy grinned widely. I already told you, I can't leave this place, Sanji replied firmly. I owe the old man too much. Meanwhile, Jin approached them, supporting a still unconscious Krieg. Straw Hat. Thank you. We'll leave now and never return to this restaurant. Make sure you feed your crew properly from now on, Sanji told him, tossing him a small bag of food. Jin caught it with his free hand, tears forming in his eyes. Thank you. Both of you. He turned to his crew. Let's go. As the defeated pirates began to leave, Zeph emerged from the restaurant's entrance. Eggplant, he called out to Sanji, we need to talk. Zeph led Sanji to his private quarters in the restaurant, closing the door behind them. The atmosphere was tense. "Listen up, little eggplant," Zeph began, his voice gruff but carrying an underlying softness. "How long do you plan to waste your life here?" "What are you talking about, old geezer?" Sanji retorted. "This restaurant is my life. I owe you everything." "You don't owe me anything," Zeph interrupted sharply. "I didn't save your life so you could spend it paying back a debt that doesn't exist." Sanji stood silent, his cigarette trembling slightly between his lips. "All blue," Zeph continued. "That was your dream, wasn't it? The legendary sea where all the world's fish gather. You'll never find it staying here." "But the restaurant will be fine," Zeph cut him off again. "You've trained these cooks well enough. Besides." A small smile formed under his braided mustache. "That rubber boy. He reminds me of someone I used to know. Someone who wouldn't let anything stand between him and his dreams." "That Straw Hat Kid," Zeph continued. "He's going to the Grand Line, isn't he? That's where All Blue is said to be." Sanji clenched his fists, memories of his childhood dreams flooding back. "Old man. Listen well, because I'm only going to say this once." Zeph's voice grew stern. "Get out of my restaurant. Go chase your dream. That's an order from your head chef." "You can't just," Sanji started, but emotion caught in his throat. "I didn't give up my leg so you could spend your life being a simple cook in East Blue," Zeph said, his eyes meeting Sanji's. "I did it so you could live to fulfill your dreams." Tears began welling up in Sanji's eyes. All these years, he'd stayed out of gratitude, out of a sense of duty. But deep down, he knew Zeph was right. His dream of finding All Blue had never truly died. "If you understand, then go pack your things." Zeph turned away, hiding his own emotions. "That rubber kid won't wait forever." "You're still a crazy old man," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "Who's going to keep this place running when I'm gone?" Zeph let out a gruff laugh. "I was running this restaurant long before you showed up, you little brat. Now get going before I kick you out myself." As Sanji turned to leave, Zeph added one last thing. "And Sanji, when you find All Blue, come back and tell me about it." Sanji nodded, unable to speak through his emotions. He left Zeph's quarters and headed to his own room to pack his belongings. As he gathered his things, memories of his years at the Barati flooded his mind. His training, the countless fights with Zeph, the lessons learned, and the customers served. Meanwhile, on the deck of the Barati, Luffy was waiting with his characteristic grin, somehow knowing that things would work out exactly as he'd hoped. Sanji emerged onto the deck, carrying a small bag with his belongings. The other cooks of the Barati had gathered, trying their best to maintain tough expressions despite the emotion of the moment. "Hey, look who finally decided to show up," Patty called out, his voice gruff but betraying a hint of sadness. "Shut it, you second-rate cook," Sanji replied with a smirk, then turned to address all the cooks. "You guys, take care of the old man. Just get out of here already," they shouted in unison, though their eyes were beginning to water. Luffy's grin widened as Sanji approached. "So, you're coming?" "Yeah," Sanji lit a cigarette, trying to appear casual. "Someone's got to make sure you don't starve to death out there." Suddenly, from behind them, Zeph's voice boomed from the upper deck. "Sanji." Sanji turned, looking up at his mentor one last time. "Don't catch a cold," Zeph said simply, but the words carried years of unspoken feelings between them. Sanji felt his composure cracking again but managed to give Zeph a firm nod before turning toward the Going Merry, where Usopp and Nami were already waving. While Yosaku and Johnny looked at the scene thoughtfully. "Welcome aboard," Nami called out cheerfully. As Sanji stepped onto the ship, the cooks of the Barati began shouting their goodbyes, their tough facades finally breaking. "Don't get yourself killed out there. Remember to keep your knives sharp. Show them what a Barati chef can do." Luffy stretched his arm to grab onto the ship's railing and catapulted himself aboard with a laugh. "Let's sail." As the Going Merry sailed away from the Barati, with their new cook aboard, the crew settled into a celebratory mood. Sanji was already in the kitchen preparing their first meal together, while Luffy sat eagerly at the table. Johnny and Yosaku, having decided to accompany the Straw Hats for a while, stood quietly on the deck. They were inspired by the crew's strength and camaraderie and hoped to learn from them during their journey. Nami stood at the ship's railing, her expression growing increasingly troubled as she studied her maps. Her hand unconsciously moved to touch the tattoo on her shoulder. Arlong Park, she whispered, knowing they were drawing closer to her hometown with each passing wave. The weight of her mission and Arlong's threat hung heavy in her mind. Johnny, sensing the tension, exchanged a glance with Yosaku. They understood that the crew was heading into something significant and were determined to support them in any way they could. Luffy, despite appearing absorbed in anticipating Sanji's cooking, cast a knowing glance in Nami's direction. His usual grin softened slightly as he watched his navigator struggle with her inner demons. The real battle is just beginning, he thought to himself, remembering fragments of what awaited them at Arlong Park and beyond. As the sun began to set, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, a fitting backdrop for the storms that lay ahead. With Johnny and Yosaku now part of their journey, the crew was ready to face whatever challenges awaited them, united by their shared resolve and the bonds they were forging.